Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ultramind 17. Thanks for tuning in from wherever you may be. I'm sorry for the delay of the show because we would have been doing this yesterday, but kind of mixed up with the time zones and everything. But everything's fine. I'm here now with Michael Tsarion from the Unslaved podcast, and um, we are going to speak about music and being an artist in a world that is very much steeped in politics and ideology and a lack of philosophy in art. Well, there's art, but there's, bad art. And we're just going to speak freely on the things that matter to us the most. And we'll just see where this will go. And before we go into it, I want to welcome Michael for, just to this show. And thank you for having taken the time to be here, Michael.
No problem. Glad it was on before, and thanks for the invitation. Now, real appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you just released your new album, and it's really, really good. And so, could you kind of explain what inspires you to even do this? Because and when did that start? When did the inspiration start for you?
Yeah, well, that goes back to 90 and 91 when I had a lot of problems getting. We just moved back to the States, and the whole reason for that move at that year, right, was to get a band together, band I had with people, and that didn't work. So basically, they went their own way, into drugs and drink and all that kind of shit, and I'm totally anti all of that. So after realizing that there was no turning back, so to speak, then I was at an extreme loss. I was not only not in the band, that project wasn't going to work, I was not in my own land. It's like everybody packing up and going on a big 6,000-mile journey, the suitcases in hand, only to find out, they left a note on the door, and feathered their own beds and took off. So it was very, very. First of all, it was like a shock factor, I'd say. That was the case, because again, I didn't come to America for any other reason except that. We'd been before, actually, more as short-term visiting, and so I'd been before, but this sojourn, this 1989, late 89, 90 transition was for music, for the sake of music. That's how I got there. That's why the intention was. And then when the rug was pulled, it was like a shock for a while. It's like getting a good crack on the head, and also a lot of physical things followed, in the sense of I walked in one day and everybody had completely gone from the house. So I put the key in the door, opened it, walked in, and the entire house was gutted apart from my room, which I'd actually learned how to lock so that the fuckers couldn't get in. But basically every single thing in the house was gone. I just walked. I mean, even the fridge was empty.
Wow.
I'm just looking around, going, hey, what the hell? And there wasn't even a note or anything. Later, about an hour later, a phone call came that explained the matter. But I was in a total state of shock. Now, as those weeks went by, rent had been paid, so I had a few weeks to think about it before where am I even going to live? A question started coming up. But during that shock period, there was a Gibson guitar that had been left by these people, and in the corner of the room, it was a 1965 vintage B25, actually, but it had been really badly treated and had a huge crack in the side that I later got fixed, right? So I sat there and almost in a state of bitter tears, like laughter and I don't know the word for it, bittersweet experience, like, oh my God, it was a shakeup. And so the guitar sort of led the way. Here was this guitar, became my companion, for many years. And then of course, since I wasn't going to be playing bass, or we weren't going to be in this band format, which would have led us then more into the mainstream. And, as we talked before the show here about the record business, it would have led us in that direction. So that's all cut off for me now. So it really was a matter, to answer your question, whether I'm even going to continue in music, because coming to California, there's a lot of other things to be doing now. I mean, the clock is ticking and you're in the land of the sunshine, and, there's opportunity in that sense. So, hey, why not just go for that? Or are you going to stick with music, and that's what I was going through. So it was a very shocking period, very hard to make a decision. But it was almost like that, just having that acoustic guitar at hand sort of was a comfort in a way. And then from there, in a very primitive way, I got some tracks down, Some of them, they're actually turning up on these CDs, believe it or not, right back then, 1991. And then the journey began. So why not? I'm a person that when you throw me the ball, I will literally, run out of the stadium with it. I mean, so it's been 38 years of a process, from that point, building up to where we are now to finally get the CDs into open, to make them public. And I'm down to the last one. I'm almost halfway through the very final one of that series of 6. As you say, the last one, Shadow One, just got released like a week ago. So it's an incredible thing to look back and see that journey, actually. But it is bittersweet, because when you remember back at the beginning, it was a state of extreme, financial and just, I would say, even emotional turmoil to be left flat like that. And so these are victories. You see, in a way, I look at this repertoire as being vindications of that time. It wasn't a happy time, but it became one. It forged its own path. It led me along, or more than I led it along. And so having every track come about and go, hey, that's great, let's put that one up. Each one of them is almost like a great flame. Another flame has been lit, to show that victory and triumph came at the end, as opposed to complete destruction. That's where I was left. But, I climbed out and carried on regardless. And that's a great testament and a feeling of accomplishment.
Right. So what was the reason for you to move to the US, to kind of make it, or the idea of it?
Yeah, we had quite a good band in Britain. It was getting sort of well known. I played with people that were very, very good musicians, far, far better than I was. I was not good at all. But it was a project that involved, other people and quite a large group, actually, we had at that time, who followed us, and we were going somewhere. But because we were heading to States and we had green cards and stuff like that, we didn't want to make Britain the platform. So we didn't do too many gigs. Our focus was entirely on leaving. And so whereas another band would have then got out on the streets and made a name for themselves in Ireland, right, in Britain, we actually didn't do that, because we said, why? What's the freaking point of building up a big fan base here, and we're going to be on a plane tomorrow and they're never going to see us again? That would be totally counterproductive. So apart from a little gig here and there, and then this larger extended, family of supporters, we didn't want to publicize it and make it even bigger, because we knew we were going. And so then everybody went, and everybody also didn't go together. Some of the sabotage that happened at that time was that the people who were in control of this move separated the band members, so that it actually, we all went out separately. And that was a catastrophe, because it actually weakened our voice. I'm cutting a long story short here, but whereas it would have been much better had we all gone together, or very, very near at hand. Actually, a year actually went by before, one went out, and then the second followed. And then another 3 years, or some bizarre thing like 2 years or 3 went by before the next guy comes out. So I was like, this is not going to work. And in that meantime, more breakdowns happen in the middle. So when I explain it to people in a shorthand, I just say that the whole thing went arse about face. The best musician in the band decided to, become a druggie.
Of course, mandatory.
Sell us all out. Yeah, an alcoholic, and hang around with thugs, and drug dealers and other low-life scum, and act like the big fish in the, this, what are they called, the big fish in the small pond or whatever. Now we're in the big pond, but he's still acting that way. So he just slammed the door on the rest of us in a most egregious way. And so what really happened, was about 6 years of a waiting game took place, because the persons who did this did not, I think see, I give people freedom to do whatever they want. So don't get me wrong, I'm not critiquing that whatever decision the person made. I still feel bad about it. But it's not so much the decision that those parties made. It's that the fact that they didn't consult and sketch it out for the other person, so they could make their decisions. See, in a business role or anything else, in a partnership, the other person has the decency to come and say, things have changed, mate. A year's gone by. So things have changed. I've met such and such, or I'm going to do, the plan has changed. So I'm letting you know that exactly, debriefing you, so that now we're not leaving you in the lurch. Well, see, I didn't get that. What I got was being strung along for 6 years, till almost 96. I was strung along with the promise that it's still going to happen. If I hear some of you saying, what a sucker you were to wait that long, yep, I've thought about that many times. There's an element of that. But it's an element born out of a virtue of trust, right? I absolutely blindly trusted everyone that I knew at the time. Family members, other people involved, people who had set themselves up as managers, everyone in the mix. And so only about 96, some weird thing happened, very brief, very small thing happened. And then the penny dropped and said, they're not going to come back for you, They've been making you feel it, the phone will ring, but that's not going to happen. Now, I would have been absolutely devastated at that period, 96, except for one thing, that acoustic guitar. Because in that 6 years, I wasn't completely blank. I had been composing. And by 96, I had a huge repertoire. See, if you think about all the other tracks that are on those 6 albums, it's about, I don't know, 114 tracks or whatever, right? Well, I didn't have 114 tracks back in 96, but I may have had 50. That's not bad, right? For a beginner. Also messing about with open tunings and what have you. And also a guy who wasn't naturally talented like these other people I'm talking about who are massively talented. So it wasn't bad, actually. So I thought, well, so 96 would have been just a free fall into despair. But there was that safety net of that guitar in the corner of the room said, no, you got your own thing here. And, maybe one day you'll get to record it. And that was way, way down the line, of course. But 96 was a pivotal time. And then just after that, about 98, 99, 2000, I had 3 or 4 people come into my life who were very supportive of my playing because it had got better. Not that I thought it had, but they were saying, this is professional. We love it. When are you going to do this? But much more deep sense of support that I'd ever had. And even one man who was a millionaire, he helped me. He actually gave me my first proper handmade guitar. He had bought it for himself. We had gone around some stores looking for guitars for him. And down the line, just out of fucking pure pity or something like that, he gave me one of these expensive Taylor guitars. And I kept it for many years and perfected most of my tracks, maybe brought the count up to say something like 80 or 90 songs because of that guitar. Hitherto, until 98, I'd been playing a $150 machine-made Fender, from a pawn shop. And it took me 2 years to pay that off, just to give you a bit of context. Mm-hmm. So the dead notes, how can you finish a track? Because I play all the way up the neck, right? Yeah. Well, this guitar up, see around the 12th fret, and certainly even beyond that, it was impossible to finish because the notes were just dead. And so what I thought I did provincially to finish a track, no, it was going to have to be revised. So it's only when I got that really Stalin guitar, right, that I went, whoa, what have I been playing? And then I start fixing 20, 30 tracks, and then I could consider them finished. But here's the weird thing with composition. Classical people know this as well. And I think all musicians, this will make a lot of sense to them. And that is, if you are a composer of pieces, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best person to play them. Right? Classical people know this because they play other great composers' music. But that composer just composed them. He wasn't the best exponent. You need a professionally trained guy to read the music and play it. So something like that also was a learning curve because I'm composing, but I'm not playing them that well. So my life has been a dual thing of composing the tracks and then rigorously training in a way that I never predicted would happen, didn't want to have happen, but you're stuck with it because nobody's going to play your tracks better than you. So you're lumbered now with this enormous learning curve of how to play the guitar, reasonably well, if not brilliantly, then at least reasonably well, so. And then on the other hand, you've got people who play brilliantly, but don't compose their own stuff. They're always doing 90% covers or 80% covers. And I'm not that kind of person. I don't like to copy anybody. I have influences, but those influences came through osmosis. Right. I think the thing I'd say about my music is that first, I'm not educated in a technical way at all. So people listening to this, apologize for that because I won't be even making half sense to most of those people. But also, I don't copy anyone else in a one-to-one way. I have influences, but it's all about, to me, why lift up an instrument? I know you agree with this. Why lift up an instrument if it's not about personal expression? That has to be the first thing. Absolutely the number one thing. And if other people are hearing influences, hey, that's great. But for me, you see, back in that 90 period, I was so dejected after years of playing and studying and thinking we're going to change the world. You asked a question about whether we're going to make it. I wanted to make it back then, but I wanted to make it because for me, music was the avenue, the conduit to changing the world on a spiritual level. Now, of course, that was all shut down, but back then naively, I did feel that. And so the dejection factor, when that was taken away from me, that now a platform, a means to change the world, mythological lyrics and, all our favorite bands like Rush changing the world with their lyrics. I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that one way or the other. And I was writing the lyrics and stuff like that. So I felt that an entire career, I felt that an entire vocation had been stripped from me. That's why it was an act of supreme betrayal. And then the subsequent being played for a sucker. Oh, yeah, well, don't worry. We're still interested. Oh, don't go anywhere. Stay right there. In other words, don't evolve, don't go and get another job, don't join another band, don't, I was frozen out. But I was also, manipulated to being on hold. And for 6 years in America, I was on hold. And believe me, if I hadn't been studying music, or not, like I said, if I hadn't been practicing, and if I hadn't been working on the other stuff you know me for, right, the research of all these occult matters or whatever, conspiratorial matters, I would have been in a shit state. But now, since we're talking only about music, if I had taken their word for it and just futtered about, I would have been I was already pretty dejected. I would have been infinitely more so, because I didn't. Another thing, that I was playing bass at the time, you see, and by being put on hold at this time, my bass guitaring suffered because I couldn't go out and afford a rack, and I was prevented in getting the rack that, there's so many different kinds of bass style, especially at that time, if you think about it, right? So I was prevented from actually getting my bass together, my bass rig, the sound, the type of bass. If you're playing death metal like Slayer or something, you need a different bass than you do if you're playing the Joe Satriani stuff. So there's, right. Or even the Steve Harris stuff, so that every time you turn around, it's going to cost you another $5,000 in those days. So I had to make one choice once, and even then it was going to be pressure. But when this other stuff bandjacks me, then I couldn't get any gigs, any equipment together. And so my bass chops and all of that also was suffered as well. So there was multiple layers there, where these other people just went into the sun. It was all barbecues and, wonderland for them. Everything was laid on. Thousands of dollars worth of equipment were bought to them. They were in the limelight. Everybody gathered around them, and they really milked it. What did they achieve out of it? Nothing.
I was going to ask you, have you ever seen them again after that time?
Yeah, not too many times, but we've had ongoing altercations. My process through the 90s was detaching from them and their ways. And as I say, that's helped by music, because I formed my own stuff. I was doing my own acoustic stuff. So when people are listening to that music and I'm getting feedback about how emotional it feels and how deep it feels, yeah, every single note. There's not a single note in there that doesn't represent a foot on that road, over a 10, 20, 30, even a 30. Like I say, the whole process is 38 years. Well, each note is a step along that road. So that's why it sounds that way. It's not frivolous. It's not entertainment, in that it is entertainment, but it's entertainment plus. Mm-hmm. And there's meaning in that music. And now people can understand that it was a torturous journey, like going through a forge in many ways. And it was painful, slightly ludicrous to see these false bastards, being completely in the pink. And the guy who was really ready to change the world, ended up getting to do it in another way, right? But music was meant to be the first capsule through which a lot of what I do now is done in a different way without that capsule. But music has been in my life from the beginning, and it will be, to the end. It's not a hobby. This was my main vocation. It's just we had a train wreck, that sent me flying, and it took many years to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, it's not a hobby. I've been trying to explain that to family as well. It's like, oh, that's cool that you can do that, but yeah, it's not cool. It's just who I am. I wouldn't want to do anything else if I have the chance. So, what have been your main inspirations for which bands or whatever?
Yeah. Oh, the inspiration started again in '90 when I got to the States. I worked in Palo Alto. There's an experience, but I worked at this very famous grocery store. It was like a kind of a Whole Foods. It was a kind of a nature store, and it was just filled with kooks, people I didn't like. Right, but one of these guys I didn't like was a master guitarist. On open tuning, and he was the one who introduced me to Martin guitars, everything, things I had no clue, right? I didn't realize how handmade guitars were mostly made in America. I had no idea about that ethos. I had no idea about these little subcultures, of people who loved this 60s music, the guitaring of, say, Bert Jansch, John Renbourn, Ralph McTell, people like that, right? I didn't know in fact, they knew more about Irish music than I did coming from Ireland. I didn't know this at the time. So this one oik that was our manager, and I hated him from head to toe, but I gave him a star because he knew all about this music, right? And on a good day, he'd bring in tapes of Archie Fisher and people like that, people I'd never heard of or only heard of slightly. But when you're in Ireland, for some reason, you have a resistance to that, right? By being away from the mountain, a weird flip happened, and I start getting more interested in the history of my own culture and country while I'm far away. Call it homesickness, I really don't know. Some sort of nostalgia took place, which, see, back in Ireland, you couldn't give a shit, right? You just want away from everything that's Irish. Anyway, he brings in all of this music, he starts playing it, and I'm absolutely freaked out, captivated by this sound. So, like I say, on a good day, this fella made me a couple of tapes, and boy, God, were they played over and over again. You see, so that's then the John Remborns, the Bert Janches, those kinds of people came into my life, and others as well. Other people, Tim Hart, that kind of proto sound that the Zeppelins were listening to. See, people look back and think, oh, these great rock bands, or even Bob Dylan or Joni Mitchell or Paul Simon. No, they were those guys that are much more public and famous were listening to a very small group of people like Davy Graham, right, in England, unknowns, which is always the case. You see, that sort of attracted me. And so I started listening to this Irish and Scottish music and got into it really, really big time. And that's sort of what helped. And then I'd say, like I just mentioned, see, between 98 and 2000, because I had those 2 or 3 people that supported it, I think that was crucial. I don't know if I would have been able to make it over that hill and even think of doing records or anything like that without them, because I think I would have continued to play. I did 5 years in open mic, Seattle, so I've definitely continued playing. But see, without my friend's support, when he gave me that guitar, and actually later on he gave me a second one as well. So and I think later on even a third. So, but the 2 first Taylors were top of the line guitars. Without his assistance, I really don't think I would have felt enough progress in everything. And then this other person I knew was very, very supportive, tremendously supportive, and I'm very sort of, at that time I was very susceptible to that. I really needed that support and feedback, and I got it. And so I think that, that was clear. So then about 2003, I start thinking more in terms of then really upgrading the practice. And then what I started to do then was to really, to answer your question more succinctly, start to listen to those influences, in a different way from a producer's point of view. Like, well, I just love that. That was been back in the 90s. That's brilliant. How do you do that? I wish I could do that. But after this certain point, it became more constructive. And I would say I moved into having the ear more of a producer, probably small p, right? But still, it's a big evolution. Oh, how's that being done? What kind of guitars are they playing? Is he close to the mic or far away? Is there a capo? Is there not a capo? Is it steel strings or gut strings? Is it full fingernails, or is it some steel picks or finger pick or thumb pick? Or when I start getting into all of that, which was never planned and not something I'm normally like to even bother with all of that. But it came of its own because you get fascinated in the subject and you follow it through, to wherever the road may lead, so to speak. And that was aided by other people as well, who made that easy. If I had technical questions, it was good to have feedback there. See, all of this wouldn't be understood to somebody unless they understood what it was like to grow up in Belfast in the 70s and 80s. If you ever was like us, little metalheads or whatever, and we tried to walk into a store there to ask just simple questions to the people who owned those stores. And I won't mention the names of the stores because most of them are out of business now anyway in Belfast. But I'll just say this, that bar one or one store, all the rest would have looked at us like, what's the cat dragged in? And they were certainly not interested in helping us. They were certainly not interested in anything except kicking our ass out the door. So when you've had years and years and years of that, you probably become like me. And that would be a person who had continual fights with the people in the shops. So was notorious and couldn't get in any of the pubs, record shops, there's a CD stores like Tower. I was barred from them all. I was barred from all the pubs, and I was barred from all the music shops. As soon as they let all my friends in, but you out, right? And that was for giving them mouth, right? And getting into their faces because I didn't take the shit they were giving me, right? And what it also did was that when I arrived in America, because I'd been programmed with over 10 years of this, I was very prickly when I walked into the guitar stores there. And if any of those people in those stores, even just because they had a bad day or whatever, gave me even so much as a scowl, I was like on the warpath. And so I'd
Punk
start,
rock.
yeah, I would like fucking, yeah, I would go into my mode, right? And for sometimes no reason. Now, I think there was a couple occasions when it was good for good reason, but on the whole, it was me. I was so pumped up that if there was bad customer service, I would be like, "Oh, you got a fucking problem," and get into their face. And so that took about 4 or 5 years to calm down. So by 96, now I was a little calmer and not as wild, right? And so I could sort of absorb. And then when I met my friend who was very wealthy, oh, see, this is interesting. Now that I go around with him, and he'd slap down a credit card for 5-10,000 dollars to buy a guitar. So, hey, Michael, how's it going, mate? Lovely to see you. Hey, have you tried this one? Am I in the right shop?
Mhm.
As soon as my friend, we went around all the shops in the Bay Area. As soon as he would, buy 2-3 guitars at a time, they're top models. Suddenly, I was royalty.
Wow.
I
You
would
made
walk
it?
in, lovely people, lovely, lovely people, right? As soon as I'd walk in the door, the same guy who was like, "Oh, you, Tradesman's Entrance." I'm not fucking kidding you, right? No, it's like, Michael, come on. Have you seen this latest one? Try that, mate. Here's a stool. Want a cushion? How about a coffee?
Wow. Yeah,
And see,
that's interesting.
I'm probably like you. Hypocrisy. Well, actually, betrayal is the number one thing on my list of hatreds, right? But see, hypocrisy, it's a quick second. And so I didn't go along with it because I just can't stand that psychophantism. But I used it to learn more, because now they would ask a question. Now it was rolling out all the bolts. Fucking loathsome creatures, right? But this is the way it goes down. So I then learned through this experience many things about guitars, and a little bit more support came in. My knowledge base was growing about the actual instruments. I'm in America, do as the Romans do. They've got the great stores, they got the great luthiers. Learn. And so I tried to absorb then as much as I could, and finally came upon Taylor guitars, which I like. And the journey went on from that point. So, but it wasn't easy. The treachery's been involved, a lot of downtime, a lot of useless waiting, a lot of terrible sorrow over seeing other people's talent unused. Which of course you can't. It's that people know it's that old story about how come the black sheep, or the one who nobody paid any attention to, does very well, and the one who is basking in the light and getting all the accolades is an alcoholic or a drug addict or just a useless article that wasted his talent.
Right.
So I'm a living proof of that, really.
Yeah, this is kind of a gateway to another subject that I wanted to talk about, is the industry, which is a total fabrication of it's like this idea of what it means to be famous and what it means to be successful. And I've spoken in the past on the Unslaved show, actually, about Max Martin, the songwriter that is single-handedly responsible for all of the pop songs, the pop hits, like Britney Spears and Timberlake and Ariana, what's her face?
Yeah, Adriana Rich, yeah.
And so what this Max Martin guy does, he's a songwriter, but he used to play in a metal band. He's from Sweden, but he must have thought, well, that this is not really getting me anywhere, so I might just, because now he's doing interviews, and every time he's answering, what made you do this, or what is your technique, he gives these lame answers like, well, you just have to make sure that you write a hook, which is the first 40 seconds that that should grab you by the throat, and you listen, and as long as you do these tricks, you got a hit. And everybody is like, oh, Max is so brilliant, oh, what a mastermind. And I'm like, I can do that, but I will make a much better song than you, though. And so his net worth is almost 300 million or something, by writing these songs that I think you and I can write, but we won't, because what we see happening now in the pop circles there nowadays is, it's absolutely, it's empty. It's in the least, at least it is empty, but most of the time it's filled with garbage. And every several months there's a new artist with the same exact sound, because that is the plan, because that sells, because these artists are in debt to their record label. They get like 500,000 to create your album. The studio time you have to pay, and then you have to make sure your album sells. And but that's not your cash that you earn, because you have to pay your record label back, and then they take their cut, and ultimately the band is left in debt. So you have to create more albums and more songs in order to pay off the CEOs. And that's why there's so many songs and bands that you just see popping up, because they have to pay them back. And this is the industry at work. It's the same thing with the band Biscuit. I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. Limp Bizkit is this rage rock, in the 90s and the 2000. They were the rebels, and these anti-establishment people. But then Fred Durst, the singer, became a vice, senior, like a CEO of Interscope Records. At first, they were like anti-establishment, doing what everybody does, and now he's just making sure that these bands are continuing to grow. So it's really it is hypocrisy. Yeah.
Yeah, that is completely disgusting, and it's so formulaic. But see, again, it's like in the big pharma question: who the hell is buying this rubbish, this drivel? Back in the 70s, you had fucking Gary Glitter and Shakin' Stevens. People in Britain that you just wonder, how did it happen? And yet they're billionaires, not just millions, billions. Everything they touch turned to gold. And right near beside them are brilliant musicians who never got heard of. And the same thing is in 60s, 70s. And so what's happened down through those decades is that thing that you're talking about has just been perfected. It started off with this and that producer back in the 60s, and everybody laughed at them and, oh, you're so formulaic. Then it went to Stock Aitken and Waterman of Island Records, and then somebody else and then somebody else. So they've taken that formula and just perfected it, ironed it out, and cookie cut it. And what can you do? So one of the things that happened in the 90s, what by the band breaking up, is actually saved me, because I didn't know that later on there's going to be this independent way of doing things, in which you're much more in charge of the music and its production. You're much more in charge of the artwork. You're much more in charge of the concepts. You're much more in charge of the order of the songs that you choose, and where they can be. I did 6 CDs, so that becomes quite a problem about what songs to put beside each other and all of these kinds of things. Why is somebody else that I've never met making all those decisions for me? So
Exactly.
but I didn't know that was coming. But I still, out of just pure resistance, didn't want to go down the corporate route. And as a matter of fact, another thing happened. I did discuss this with my cousin, who was close to me. He died, but he was close to me, and he was a sort of a part witness of all of the shit that I'm talking about. And we agreed that if these other punks that we were dealing with in the band had become famous, it would have been a disaster. So he and I agreed that had this band become successful, because these two drug addict freaks, one was an egomaniac, the other was just a loser. If those two guys had have been successful, we would have been in the headlines and been mocked continually. Because don't you see how the media would go after people who are writing spiritual lyrics, but yet they're seeing these other two punks crawling out of pubs at 2 o'clock in the morning, puking into the corner?
Right.
Or, I'll knock your head in. Brilliant for us, right? So in many ways, we were saved by not becoming famous, because these two monkeys and others that they were involved with would have trashed it really, and my reputation would have been ruined forever by just being associated with these idiots, getting questions from the media like, Michael, you're writing all these high-fluting lyrics about unicorns and, damsels in distress, or whatever the hell it would be, Dungeons and Dragons and God knows what else. And yet, members of your band are in jail right now. On drug charges or worse. You look like an idiot, John. You know what I mean, right? So yeah, or writing lyrics about anti-cruelty, animal cruelty, which I did a lot, right? Or anti-meat eating. Yeah, you're going to look great with your brothers, with your friends, filmed climbing out of bars and whorehouse windows, and whatever else they were into. You see what I mean? It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So
Yep.
So in many ways, I was saved from that route, and then never give it a second thought. After I moved into the open tuning stuff and start, I couldn't get. One of the reasons it took so long is because I resisted all the voices that said, "Run down to such and such a studio, mate. Here, get yourself a manager, get yourself an agent." I never did any of that. So people have to realize that when they're listening to these albums, there's blood, sweat, and tears in there, and there's a lot of sacrifice in a sense of positive spiritual valuing. I'm saying, no, I don't value that. I'm not going to go see, because remember, as well as I do, that when you go into, say you're playing music that's very mood based, it is absolutely impossible to go into a studio and sit down and just go lights, camera, action, record, and it's mood based. So you have to be in the right mood. And if they got fluorescent lights and trains going by and dickhead engineers who just go, yeah, mate, go ahead then. What's it you doing? Oh yeah, by the way, in 45 minutes we're gonna be out of here. No. So I delayed and delayed, waiting for the right person to come along. That person never came along. That studio never happened, right? And I didn't know it was going to come the time when you could do it all yourself, right? That's actually quite recent if people think about it. So I put it off and put it off. People have said, why have you taken so long? Have you any idea why I've taken so long? Because I won't fucking sell out. That's why. Because when you're doing 16 tracks that are mood based and you need to be in that place, think of the track Shadow Wand, the title track. Do you really think that can be recorded functionally like a machine in a studio? Think again. I cannot. Unless everybody clears out and I'm left there, for the whole of the night on my own in the dark. I might be able to pull it off, and even then it might not happen. We went to one studio and it looked like it could be that scene that, would rent. It was a huge amount of money, right? And he said, and I assumed that meant, okay, we get the studio all night. And I was thinking, and then your mind starts working, thinking, oh, well, great. Maybe now's a chance to get all those really evocative tracks done. So I just happened to tell the guys, oh, that's great. So we can leave all our equipment here. He goes, yeah, no problem. And I go, okay, so then can we use the kitchen at night when we get a bit hungry? We had this kitchenette area. He goes, oh, no, you'll have to be leaving at 12, or you'll have to leave at 9 or whatever. And I go, no, wait a minute. First, you're saying we can stay here all whatever. And then you're saying, no, shut up at 9 o'clock. We leave our equipment, go home, come back and get into the mood again. You see, so right. Every time they don't ask you, hey, what are you doing? Maybe this is are you playing sitar or a raga, Indian ragas? You can't just walk in and walk out and go for McDonald's and come back and go, I'm in the same mood right now. It doesn't work. You've got to be in the mood. Does anyone ever understand what that means anymore? No, they only understand the style gate and the ticket and the price. And then he said he came up with something like, if we pay him $2,000 more, maybe he'll think about it. We just went, bye, call, we'll call you, don't call us. And another one, this is fairly recently, this is within the last couple of years, fell through. So there was no alternative than to do it on your own, which is another learning curve for you. Now you're taking it on again. Then the artwork, all the rest of it. It's quite a burden. It's quite a learning curve. It's something that definitely is much more work than people could possibly imagine. And the more original you are, the more work it goes in. And then pertaining to your question of formulaic stuff, how can you be formulaic on open tuning? The thing is the least formulaic. I mean, it's the river you're following. It's the antithesis of commercialized music, because it just leads you in all sorts of directions very, very spontaneously. And you have to get in touch with a muse on a much higher level than any corporate music. No matter how well played it is or sophisticated it is formulaic. And that's why, even though I admire this and that modern guitarist, I'm pretty, I can listen to one or two tracks. That's it. I appreciate it. Go, hey, you guys are great. But there's so much missing. That's, my favorite comedian, Bill Hicks, he said, play from the fucking heart. Yep. And believe me, that's it. I do it.
No less than that. And that's another thing about these times, these modern times. It has its pros and cons, but I'm so grateful that I just have to say, I'm very skilled at what I'm doing. I can record, I can write, I can mix. I'm an audio engineer. I'm a designer. What the hell? I mean, this is. I could have just paid, several people to do that, and this is my studio. This thing, this doesn't weigh anything. It's like it's not even a pound, And this room is my studio, and I'm so happy that I have these these opportunities to do everything myself, because this is where a lot of people in the industry they would lose their own their hard-earned money to spending it in somebody else's studio. And like you said, the engineer can be some sort of a dick. Oh, would you just do it right already? And while the lights are on your on your head, and there's time and there's money involved, and so that's why you can't really expect bands to be like you said, mood based, because people don't really take into account vibes and the soul that goes into it. So that's why everything that the industry just shits out today, it's like really it's dead. But I have to say, whatever these producers do, they do a damn good job of making it sound like it's very crisp, it's very clear, it's very high quality, I must admit that. But imagine if that was used for something else, for a band or an artist that is really trying his or her best to convey his or her mood and to uplift society. Because what you see now, it's I mean, even young kids are seeing this stuff on everywhere, and it's all very very sexualized, very it is all about the base level of humanity, just, and it's always so it just sounds empty. I mean, I don't know how else I could explain it. It's just and most and rappers actually are one of the most exploited bands or people in the industry, because rappers, they always start out young. They come from the hood, and they want to make it, and this is your chance. And then you have these CEOs who have a plan for them. Oh, just sign this contract, but they won't even read it, because what it says is, I own your ass. And you can't even leave, because if they want to leave, well, first of all, they can't, because they're in debt. So we can put you on hold, and not make anything, but we own you. And this is why people get killed, or they have a sudden drug overdose, or just like the recent situation with Nipsey Hussle, the rapper that was shot. He was doing his own thing. He sold mixtapes to what was it? I don't know, Dr. Dre or something. I don't like it. I don't like any of it. But he was doing his thing. He sold mixtapes for $100, which means he's just doing his own thing, and he would be completely going against the industry, because normally you would just who wants to pay $100 for a mixtape? So if people actually buy that, then you know that it's a good friendship, and then you can go on from there. But then he was killed, and it's really not sure why he was killed, but it was someone from the industry as well, I think. So there's a lot of things to be said there as well.
Yeah, it's actually pretty rotten on many levels. Same with movie making business. You don't know what kind of gangsters you're dealing with. I've got huge suspicions of that Island Record group being tied to British intelligence, and even some more sinister groups. So there's certain Dionysian people that they pick up on, as well, and make famous just because of other spurious reasons. How they come across to the public. A lot of astrology would be coming to bear at that point. And so I've never cursed the fact that I ended up doing it in a solo way, and just stuck to doing open mic in the beginning, just to get out amongst other musicians instead of sitting at the house. And then you get to use a PA as well. Not very good PAs, but at least it's better than sitting. See, if you listen acoustically just to yourself, that's very good. But sometimes you actually need to go through a PA system. I find that very helpful, because it detaches you from your music, and it helps your playing. And the better format is even in an open mic. They got it all set up for you and stuff. I lived in such tiny places. There's no way I could even have, a lot of my playing has also been hindered through over a 20-year period by having to play so softly. I used to use a silk and steel strings, which are like an 8 or 9 gauge. Can you believe that? And one of the reasons was, because the kind of guitar I had, they sounded good. But the other reason was because I had to literally play so lowly not to be evicted. Because the kind of landlords I had, I would have been evicted. So it was very, very difficult with neighbors. And, I've had a very unusual experience. And practicing for hours. I had to do it very, 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 very gently, and it was a difficult experience. And so I'm not that fussed, in the end, that it went that direction, and that one had to do it solo and one had to do it grindingly slow, because, as you say, it made me an artisan more than a musician. The way you said that you now know all these different skills, and those last. They sit with you. They're important, and it makes you into more of an artisan, not just a person who is following some fucking trend, in that sense. And especially when you do it, another good thing that came out was also that, oh yeah, I'm not a flamenco player, I'm not a Cajun player, I'm not a bluegrass player, I'm not a classical player. I'm all of those things and more, right? I haven't locked into something like that. And a track of mine can be 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, right? Another thing is the radio doesn't play long tracks like that. People don't even know how to listen to long tracks like that anymore.
Exactly.
Skipping through it and all this nonsense. But I've held all those traditions. There are some good signs. Spotify and a couple of other major labels, so to speak, platforms anyway, have now said that rock music is selling more than any other kind of genre. That's music to my ears. Love to hear that. It could mean there's a turnaround even amongst the teens who do get sick of this plastic, shrink wrap music.
Yeah, there could be Generation Z, by the way, who is going to see all this stuff happening. Generation after my generation, I think.
You never know, and I'm there. Because I'm there to push that along. I'm trying to get subscribers, so that I can move to doing vlogs, so that I can push that message. To me, that's real positive, to get people into guitars more, or stringed instruments in general, and even some of the music heroes, that I've got. I put a page up on my website, MSR Music for Heroes. So just at least those names are out there. People can surf them on the internet, and then when they say, "Oh my God," right, they'll hear these guys, these heroes of mine, right, like Davy Graham and all, and go, "Oh my God, we're in orbit here. There's something else going on with this folk style music," you see, and that could open up, like it did for me, whole other avenues that I was not exposed to and didn't really. Maybe just before I left, like our first trip to America was in 80. Just before I left that, I was a little bit more open to Irish folk music, but nothing to compare to when I went to the States, then start tuning into San Francisco radio stations that played nothing but Irish music. And then hearing the better bands, because some of it's rubbish, right? You have to listen to the really great stuff, the Andy Irvines and stuff like that, blow you away, right? And
yep.
Yeah, fucking hell. And then that became the Irish coming out of me, because I don't think until I heard Andy Irvine ever I was an Irishman. I may have grown up in the country and lived there. I don't mean shit. To become an Irishman in the true sense is an initiation. And he gave it to me. So, that's, to me, this is what it is. It's the great rites of passage. Well, my music can be that for somebody else, to pick up the instrument for the first time. And even if they never get beyond 3 chords or the bar chord, that is irrelevant. It's the fact that you've introduced yourself to that instrument. When you bring a musical instrument into your life, say you bring in a piano, you've just brought Handel, Mozart, Beethoven, right? Tchaikovsky, whoever, Scarlatti, you've brought the whole world of that music. You've brought all those people into your room. When you bring in a guitar and you bring in Segovia, you bring in, Django Reinhardt and Tony Iommi, you know what I mean? So I think that what happened was after 2001, I started listening with the ear of a producer. And then my learning curve went really up. That this guy from this band isn't just playing that way for no reason. He's doing it. He's got a style. So I started listening clearly, the Wishbone Ashes. Tony Iommi is a very important figure in my life, from a musical point of view. Not that he's in the great band. No, his actual style of playing is a style. It's a very interesting style, actually. And can teach a person like me. He's got a deformity, but I have, not an extreme deformity, but I've got issues with the wrist. I've got inhibitions, a very light touch things. So listening to a guy like that actually, was like, yeah, I can bend the rules like he did. I don't have to, do what everybody else is doing. Will Sargent from Echo and the Bunnymen, the people from the church. They all play, and I was listening now with the producers going, whoa, wait a minute, that's like freaking incredible. And then also the open tuning is a kind of a dissonant tuning. Here's another weird thing. One has to understand something, that open tune guitar isn't like a regular tune guitar. They're not the same instrument at all, sonically or in any other way. They're
I
certainly
agree.
not, yeah, they're not the same to play. I mean, metalheads know that because they often do also C's and D's and A's and stuff. So my music is familiar to people who play the heavier metals, but even in regular guitar, it's not the same instrument as a regular tune guitar. And that's why a lot of people won't like the sound of it, because it sounds false. Now, what it actually sounds like is it's actually not false. It sounds dissonant. Well,
Yeah,
that's another reason for people not to like it,
it's
because
not the
again,
same
the
thing.
happy stuff that you were just talking about, that formulaic stuff, is happy and hyper.
Yeah,
Shit, this is my acoustic music is the equivalent of black metal in that sense. Because the new metal, which down tunes and has maybe 6 or 7 strings or something, it's that equivalent because it's taking you into another emotional palette, and you're never going to get successful there in that way, because it's not even producers, normal people won't like it. There are certain people who do, though, which is good enough, and that's the group that we aim for, is those who love that tone, have no problem with it. And I've met those people too. They encourage me. They go, "That's beautiful. I love that. That's great." But the vast majority of people, it's their ear. It's not really something that they're ever going to like, even if you play the happier stuff version of it, right? Because just because it's open tune doesn't mean it has to be melancholic. Right? That's the beauty of Irish music. Irish music is in D's and G's and things like that, but it has this extraordinary melancholy, right? Of the immigration and the sliding, and all of these, oppression, okay, and colonization. It has all these bleak themes, but the music is extremely sweet because it's played on small instruments with thin silk strings. So this is music of an extremely complex level, where the message can be very sad and melancholic, and yet it's played in almost like a filigree, in a way that is extremely sweet. So there's the bittersweet. So in my music, I've had an ear for that, to do something similar. It's not Celtic music. That's far, far harder than I can play. But I would have said I've borrowed an influence. Let's just put it that way. There's a Celtic influence in my music. And I've also borrowed that from people like Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, who does the same thing. He plays these tunes on a very small parlor guitar, a special kind of guitar, custom made, very small scale. And they tend to sound very bright and very sweet, right? And yet sometimes the music is very, very sad and sonorous. So that's always been my favorite type of tone. And so it's been a journey and a half to try and honor it, and yet not honor it so that it's then one-to-one, I've cookie cuttered that. I don't want to do it exactly as they do it either. I wanted to keep my own sense of expression in it as well. So say I was playing jazz, I wouldn't play jazz like anybody else, like George Benson or whoever. I want to do my own thing. And that's the essence of what an instrument is. You may start doing covers, and hey, there's nothing wrong with that. And you may start with reading tab or reading music. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, you're going to crave, you should be wanting to crave your own thing, and from I didn't even have to have a learning curve. Right away, from the moment I picked up the acoustic, I was already ready to do things my own way, or quit. I'm in America, the doors are wide open, go and do something, go and whatever, do something that is more familiar to people. And by God, the push was to go and do exactly that. And I resisted it from day one. I resisted it. And what a life I had. It's something you look back and I'm almost amazed I came through it, because that's not a country for that. That's a country for conform, get rich, play the game, smile, and all's right with the world, And I took a completely different tack and went on a completely different journey, and had nothing but problems from doing it. So as I say, this music then is a sense to me of triumph, utter triumph.
Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that when it comes to sound, or songs that sound what some people would say ugly, or dark, but darkness is not the same thing as evil, or it's from the devil. It's from the devil. And like we've been speaking on that as well in the past, about darker songs or darker sounding songs, and that people automatically think it's from Satan himself. And but that's because people aren't being people aren't being introduced to different kinds of sounds other than the stuff that they hear on the radio. So I also think that there's there's good times, when it comes to the do-it-yourself movement, like you and I are doing, in a sense. So, and I was gonna ask you, are you interested in doing live shows or an open mic now, or just just somewhere in a bar to play?
Well, I've done that. So yeah, there's other projects I've got coming up, but there will be much more of that, actually doing performances. Also, the music is more popular sounding. So I had to get these 6 projects completed, and I'm on the last 5 songs of the final album. So that'll be out, before the summer, probably just in a few weeks. Actually, so then I can sit back and make that move. There's new instruments to get. It'll be a different sound. It'll be definitely involving other people as well. And I'm really excited about that, but I almost can't think of that right now. It's so close. And yet, I don't want to even put my mind there because I still have to stay consistent to this project. And then, but it's so close to the end. We're very close there. And then will come a different, whole different style. It'll be an interesting break for me. And there's already, over 100 tracks, written of that new music. So yeah, it's going to continue. And also it will involve playing the electric again and being much more compositional with other instruments as well, not just strictly finger style. That's so time consuming to practice. And a certain kind of track comes out. Now I can, sort of break the rules and it'll be, it's going to be a fun time in the future, a lot less arduous and more pleasure involved in it probably, for me. Although it has been a pleasure of its kind. See, it's not that all the music I've done hasn't been pleasurable. It has, but it's a different mood, So, and there was a different strategy involved, how the albums would be laid out, faster ones at the beginning, slower ones at the end, to create a kind of a curve, so that if somebody was to listen to them back to back, they'd have this experience. It's all been planned out in a very specific way to give each track the best airing that it can have, but also then so that when the whole project is done, it's self-contained. It doesn't bleed over, because I've worked with people who wanted me to put in, natural sounds to these, or change it in some other way. And that was great. And I wanted to. But again, then I said no to that because I could see that coming later. Say I take the 10 best of the 6 albums, redo them. I'll be happy to put in nature sounds and ambient sounds and other things, but that'll be a remix, and I'm willing to do that of say 10 or 15 of the best tracks from all 6 albums, so, but I've always thought about that. Hey, just do them as pure as can be, get them recorded in real high def. And then, hey, if you want to go back, I can go back over them endlessly for the rest of my life now and do something with them differently, add some female vocals, whatever. You can do a lot of different things, but let me just nail down, it's taken 38 years to get these together. Let's not digress at the last minute and start getting into what ifs. Let me just completely finish this project, and then step back. And because I'm a person who definitely believes in beginnings, middles, and ends. I've always been like that in my life. And don't think of moving on to the new thing until this is absolutely complete. And I think that's a really good virtue when you're dealing with difficult content, is to try. I've tried it in the other work as well. Some stuff has been delayed. My female psychology stuff has been delayed just as long as the music. So I got into that in 1989. Not that I knew much, but by 90, 92, I was already well into that subject. I haven't published anything on it until 2017. I mean, I can't even believe some of this, and then a new book was put out this year. So, but for me, that research goes back to the late 80s and into the 90s, for goodness sake. So that's my personality type. I don't care about fame. I don't care about, what the promises of people are. See, I had a crash course and all of that from a bunch of fucking traitors and losers. So, it doesn't mean anything to me, all the promises. I just make myself the promise and we'll go from there. And if fate smiles on you, it sends you right people at right time. And it certainly has done that for me as well. It's not been about, at critical times. Getting this open mic in Seattle was one of the oldest there's ever been in the whole of probably America, the group that, set this up. And so that was a really good experience. And I found it by accident. We went in, a friend and I went into a shop in Fremont in Seattle, and couldn't start climbing over guitar cases and all. We just wanted to get a coffee and a bun, right? And we're climbing over these fucking guitars. It's the first time I'd ever seen an open mic. And I looked around, well, what the fuck is all these fuckers doing here? And there was somebody up playing the guitar, you know? And she told me, oh no, this is done here, you know what I mean? And I went, what? You know, and then we sat there, we couldn't, every table was taken up. And we squeezed in beside this one table with these people sitting there. And I'm just like amazed. I'm listening to these people playing. They weren't very good, but I was interested in, you know, like this is kind of cool. And we sat, drank the coffee, and the guy we were sitting beside was the leader of the entire program, the whole open mic thing. He was the main guy. And we got chatting with him, and he was a sweet, sweet fella, and just immediately invited me, you know, when he knew that I played. And Jesus, I thought, oh God, you know, do we have the time or whatever? And I was right in the middle of doing my High Windows articles, you know, which were a tarot project and things. So, but I thought, you know, hey, that guy was real nice, and they've offered me, you know. So the next week I actually went on, and then went for 5 years. Only they were booted out of that place, and then they moved, and they ended up moving closer to where I actually lived. So it was even a double whammy, you know. It actually was quite far to go, but then they changed. They got kicked out of this place because it wanted to be more upscale, frou-frou, you know, this bistro that they were playing in. So it booted them all out. And then they ended up going to a new place, which actually was just around the corner from where I lived. So I couldn't believe it when I found that out. And then I regularly, you know, went again 4 or 5 years, and it was good experience. It was good to get out of the house. It was good to hear your music through a PA system, and also get people's responses for the first time. So, you know, this is what I'd recommend to a lot of people: is don't just play at home. You know, try to get out, or just play in another band as well. Gives you good compositional skills. You can hear other people, and then they can hear you and correct you and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've just had my first gig in the US. It was an open mic as well with my fiance, and like you said, the open mic atmosphere is a very different one from an actual gig that you go to see a certain band. So it's really like it's you meet people. We have actually met people there, or you know, that are really interested, and you can hear your own, you know, songs just, you know, everywhere, just with good sound, and then you get the idea. Oh well, this is what I'm doing, because even for me, I'm just used to playing with headphones or my speakers here, but it's a totally different vibe. And I'm looking in the chat right now, and everyone wants you to play a bit now. So there's your.
Well, I won't. I don't know if I'll play, but this is. I started using this guitar, which was custom made. So
you have to do
yeah, this last album, right, Shadow Wand, was delayed. It was meant to be out in October of last year, because the one before that was July, right, and it was meant to be October, but I got the opportunity to get a custom-made guitar, right, from this Irish company, right, and this is their model, but I designed all of the, you know, the color, this binding, and then these Chet Atkins inlays, right?
That looks so cool.
Yeah, this is all my own design, right? But the thing was, I had to wait for 6 months till it was ready. So the album should have been in October, didn't come out until, you know, just a few weeks ago. It was a long, long wait. It was really frustrating. But the reason why I waited and didn't do it on the other guitars is because I thought, wouldn't I be kicking myself if once this guitar arrives and I start playing, you know, on it, the new album, and if it turns out to be better than the other guitar, I'll be kicking myself that I didn't wait. So as hard as it was to wait those 6-8 months, it actually turned out okay, because this is actually the guitar then that, you know, it finally came, and it was better. It was better for this album. So this is the reason for the big delay, folks, you know. And I play about, you know, maybe 10 different kinds of open tuning. See, so it has that sweet sound, right? This is a very, very low tuning, and yet look how sweet sound. So that's that Celtic-y sound that I think really is a signature style of mine, really.
That DAT?
This is a G tuning.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'm not that up on them, but I think this is definitely a G. You know, people will recognize that one. See, so it's sort of a bizarre hybrid of different styles, but you know. So sort of a cascading aspect. You know, if people listen with an intelligent ear, they'll hear a lot of descending and ascending scales.
Yes.
Which wasn't planned. Right? That's not something you sit down and actually plan to do, you know, but it's a very evocative technique that's captivating. And for some reason, you know, try that one. See, so stuff like that. You know? So again, that ascending, descending, ascending, and pretty much that's in every track. If you hardly, it's difficult to find a single track. You know, it doesn't probably come through on this microphone, but this technique of ascending and descending scales, like it gives it a very waterfally effect, you know. It just has that, you know. Yeah, I can't think of examples now, but there's definitely that element, and it's particularly striking. I like music that has that, and yeah, I've noticed that's a, you know, there's a couple. It's like a repetition as well, creates a sort of a mantric effect. I think so. It can be quite evocative that way, and that wasn't planned. But once you know that there's a certain patterning happening in your music, why not co-opt it? You know, why not go with it? You know, yep. But as I said, there's a kind of a dissonance that in this kind of music that doesn't flatten it like the packaged kind of sound. You know, it's very moody, and a lot of people don't want to be taken into that mode. You know, they don't want to of a day visit their emotions. You know, and so there has to be, they want everything to be up tempo. But then what you're doing is you're sacrificing, you know, for the sake of popularity, you're sacrificing whole repertoires, whole areas of your being, you know, that can be expressed. And that's what the whole listening experience does, because music gives and gives and gives. Every time you come back to a piece that you like, it's giving you again. You can't think of a more giving thing. And you shut yourself down when you force the art that you're looking at or listening to give you only in one bloody way all the time, you know? So in these kinds of tracks that I have, you know, nothing's consistent. The mood isn't consistent. The tuning isn't consistent. The sonic experience, the modal changes, the volume, right? I'm not flattening it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different variation in it, I think, which will never be popular, will never be really commercial. In other words, it's more right-brained, if anything. It's not so left-brained. Yeah. What the people you were talking about, they've nailed it. You know, where people like to have frequency happy stuff, you know, And you can make a guitar like that. You can put a capo on. I've done that, certainly. I'm not against happy music, but this particular kind of music is, very very evocative. Just check this out, and I'll change the tuning, right? Just turn the volume. See, I don't know if you can even, just this string now, the E has been taken. It was in the D, so it's now up back to E.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry, it's in the C.
It's a drop.
No, I tightened it, so it's one up from D.
Mm-hmm.
E.
It's an E.
Yeah, now just listen to the difference.
Minor.
I'm just borrowing this one. You get a kind of jazzy feel now.
Those are my kind.
Huh? What's that?
Those are my sort of chords that I would like to play. It's, dissonant minor chords.
Right. And yet within it is the non-dissonant. So it's like I know it's breaking up a bit. So to me, it's just more experimental. See, so a descending pattern again, or reverse. That's just a very evocative type of. Let me go to a different tuning, and I'll show you another example of that. Yeah, like check this part out. See? So that's what I'm saying about these patterns. And so that'll be used, that technique, in a lot of stuff, See, so a lot of the tracks will feature that stepping sort of a motion, like water. I think that almost every track you're listening to has that. So it's interesting to listen to it and see how it manifests that way. And that's a particularly useful sort of technique, is instead of just holding a chord, is to have this sort of flowing pattern. And I identify that with Celtic music, but I may be wrong, but to me it works. It works really, really well.
It sounds awesome. Yeah. Have you ever thought about singing as well?
Yeah, I've done that in other tracks, just to write the lyrics. Remember I said when I used to do lyrics?
Yeah.
Well, then that I did that more, and then we give it to the vocalist, to do. But I think that with this kind of music, lyrics would just be overkill, because each of these tracks has a certain poetry of their own, and it's about letting that ring out. Really, they've all got their own statement to make.
That's true.
Yeah, and if I did songs again, then they'd be more chordal. Then you would go back to a more of a familiar structure. Where you'd have a chordal part, and then some other part. This fingerstyle stuff, it really doesn't work totally well for that. You can have parts. One or two songs might work that well, but ultimately, ultimately it wouldn't work. See, like that. Again, a descending and ascending. And my favorite music has that kind of thing, and it's just striking. It's just that watery feeling, that feeling of moving water, movement. When you're doing chords, then it's a totally different voice. It's a very different sort of. Okay, you can do arpeggiated chords, and that breaks it up. That makes it more like that flow. But then don't forget the one thing, when I mentioned Tony Iommi, what I forgot to mention was the whole question of his tempo changes. Another thing I've picked up very, very strongly from him, probably more than anybody else, is the question of flagrant tempo changes. You can use them all the time. You don't have to always play, the same tempo. Change it, for goodness sake, and change it even at odd points in the music. So that gave me the freedom to say, well, they do it. Listen to that. What's that? And there's some songs that they've done that are even more classically indicative of that. But then that was a thing I learned from rock players. Then you learn something from the folk players, and then you learn something from jazz, and you learn something from flamenco, right? And so on. But the idea is not to just, for me, it was never to follow their explicit technique. It was to listen to them creatively, get out of it what matters to you, and then move into a different self-expressive way. That would be the key, and to avoid anything that's too formulaic.
Yeah, I think you and I should write a song one day. That would be awesome.
When I get onto the new music, I'll be throwing you more songs than you can handle. You'll be like, what? Not another one? Yeah, we'll definitely get around to doing that.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's just like I say, I have to keep my focus. There's only really about 4 to 5 tracks of the last one. It's more than half recorded already, so just need to keep the focus on that, and take a breather from that then, because as I say, it's more than just playing the pieces. It was composing them, it was learning them, play them right, and it was recording them, doing the artwork, finding out how to upload them to the web, in a proper way, and all of this. It's all a learning curve all along the way. But because it's vocational, you don't mind it. Right? Vocation isn't work, and yet it is at the same time, it's the hardest work you'll ever do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your occupation, people say, "Oh, you're lucky, you can get up whenever you want." Like, well, I bet you I work harder than you do. I work 16-hour days, and you have a check waiting for you at the end of the week, and you've got the weekend off. So when it all comes down to it, the vocational person works far, far harder. It's just that it's at something they love. So it's not the same grueling experience as, say the work week or whatever, but it is work. This, my music alone, I have to practice for hours and all of that. And it's been a learning curve to get this instrument made, by people who are very, very competent. It was a gift I owed myself after all of the years of playing on rubbish. So, yeah, and Bob Taylor's guitars from America, highly recommend those. Very, very good instruments. When I talk about that bright sound, playing very melancholic music, but with a bright sound, well, Taylor, the guitars I had from them were maple, and maple is a wood. People who play the harp will know this, because harps are also sometimes made out of maple. It's a very bright sounding, it's a very pale, it's very white, right? Maple is a white wood, and it's a bright, brittle sound. And it works for that very purpose I just mentioned. Whereas if you turn to the rosewoods and the mahoganies, you're back to a more of a traditional guitar sound, which works for chords and works for just general middle of the road tone. The maple just gives you that little brightness, which I needed for mine. If you're down tuning, you're already into the sonorous, dissonant kind of music. What do you do to compensate then? Now you're into Leonard Cohen. It's way down the register. You're leaving people behind. But then you can pick it up again with certain techniques. You see, you drop it down so it has that, that sort of. Like a harp type of sound. So you're down in this different register, which is just incredible tonality. So you're into all of that, and then you can lift it by putting a capo, and you can lift it by playing a maple guitar. This is not a maple guitar, but again, I noticed that sonically it brightened it up a bit. And so you have this then wonderful oscillation between the dissonant, the major and the minor and all of that. And that opens up a whole bunch of possibilities that on a regular tuned instrument, 440 or whatever, or concert pitch, you just can't get, not as well anyway. You can still get beautiful evocative music out of that tuning, but there was nothing, there's just nothing to compare. And so each and every track, is open tuned. I mean, it's alternative tuning. There wasn't a single regular piece, on any of the albums. So that was a very, very interesting experience as well to do it that way.
Do you have a favorite chord? Your go-to chord? Michael chord.
Yeah, this one. But this is my favorite chord, but it's an interesting twist. Because it sounds good either strummed. It's almost like a D chord, and it can also be equally as good if it's arpeggiated. It's an interesting jazzy type of sound, but I've always liked that chord. Sorry, I haven't played all day today, practiced since yesterday, so it's a bit rough. Yeah, I usually don't sit like this either. It's a bit awkward. But yeah, there's so many. Just listen to this. Just one string fretted, right? And you do have happier, brighter tones. Then there's the... So the bar chord, would be... In this kind of tuning, the bar chord would be more like that. Sort of alternative shapes. Yeah, I think that's a nice chord. And it's a lot of fun to find them out. It makes the learning process more, because there's no books on it. You have to find them yourself. You're really thrown into the deep end to discover what chords exist. And they're really your own at that point. You've discovered them. And it's not just as formulaic and sort of boring as playing, say, the bar chords, and it's sort of, now that you found a unique chord or a unique sound, now you got to do something with it, like put it together in a song and all. So yeah, the process has been deeply creative. And I think that is why it's vocational for me, not just something that was done as a hobby or whatever, and on one level, it can limit the people that you're playing with, because they may have to detune their instruments, which they may not be used to doing, and then hopeless, they can't follow you. Or you meet these really, what's the word there would be, when they say about jazz musicians, what is it, the term they're improvisers?
Free jazz, sorry.
Yeah. Then they go, oh, it's no, what do you, G, no problem. And then you get those guys as well. But a lot of people say, oh, I never heard of that, I can't do it. And then they're limited. But then you get these guys who go, no problem, I know what you're doing. It's just that, I can handle that. And then you get something else going on, because the art of it is, see, some of the great songs, not a lot of open tuning is done in music, but there have been occasional, bands who did it for a while. Led Zeppelin's Kashmir would come to mind. The Moody Blues, the song The Question is in G tuning, So it has been done by other bands, but not a lot. And even today, I don't think there's more than one fingerstyle guitarist out there who uses open tunings on and off, not a lot. So it's still something to be discovered by people. And the reason why I think a lot of people don't do it is because of what you said. It's not formulaic. It does open up other possibilities. And if you're not there emotionally, what's the good of open tuning for you then? You're going to want to stick within what is conventional, isn't it?
Yep. And I think what we're doing, as what we're doing now in this self-made time, when we can do things ourselves. I mean, we can definitely let ourselves hear, let the world hear us, let just make an impact in the world, which is, we have to, I wouldn't say we have to fight and defeat the industry, but we have to just build next to it. We can just, we don't have to fight anything. We just have to be an anarchist in that sense. Just do your own thing, and people will hear it, because the Hollywood types would like to make you believe that this is what you want. This is what everybody wants. But no, this is what we've been fed. This garbage, and so I think this is a very good time to do this. And I think this is, by the way, the first time people have seen you play live now on video. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, it's all been part of a great journey. You know what I mean? I hope to do more of that. It's really a case of imagination, and the instrument is basically to bring out what's in your imagination. And right now there's a sort of a embargo on imagination. You're only considered important if you are sound like somebody else, or
Yep.
if your music has been flattened out, like you say, and the heart is not involved anymore. But I think you've got to experiment with your instrument. Picasso was able to experiment, but it's because he knew a lot of the basics as well. So learn some of the basics. I'm reteaching myself right now how to flat pick, using a pick, right, like that. I've always wanted to learn, and I would always recommend people do start with this. I would do the opposite. I would have loved to have learned with a pick how to play properly, because it gives you a louder projection. It's not as footery, it's it makes you hear the instrument louder, and it actually cuts through a lot of problems. And also, if you're playing with a pick, then you can transpose from guitar to mandolin to bass or to another stringed instrument much. So there's, again, people have to think this out.
Mhm.
What do they want to learn how to play? If you're using just fingerstyle without the pick, you got to be knowing why you're doing that. Because if you're playing classical, that's your choice, or flamenco, or something like what I'm doing. It has to be thought out, because there's the alternative of having a thumb pick, like I say, the flat pick, and those matter. They really do matter for the learning experience, because you won't be put off as easily. If you're getting out of the guitar or a stringed instrument what you want to get out of it, you'll continue doing it. If it becomes arduous and something's blocking, the experience, you won't continue anything with a corner, and that's a great, great, a great source of regret, because parts of your being, then your imagination, I mean, when you hold a guitar, right, it's right up against your chest, and when you play a chord, I can feel that vibrating against my body, right? Right? I mean, it's an extension of your arm, and it's part of your body. I can feel it against my skin, right? So,
yep, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's so much more than just I'm just banging away on some Billy Bragg piece of music. You'll soon find out that it's a hell of a lot more than that, right? And then when you start getting into alternative tunings and whatever, So when they asked me to build this guitar, they go, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, this is their standard style in wood. It would come in wood, right? This is a guitar they know how to make." And it was in rosewood, and it had beautiful resonant tone. And I thought, if you can make me one like that, they go, "We can, because we make them all the time, and so this is not a one-off." Then I thought, right, then this is the company to work with, because they've already got a guitar that pretty much I think works for me, but they're ugly, or whatever, or stuff I've never liked. There's your Johnny Cash black, right? I love that. And then the binding, and then these Chet Atkins inlays, which I get on all my guitars to honor the great Chet Atkins. There's all these little touches, in it. And so now I'm playing an instrument that's literally, as close to perfection as I could ever want. And now that was a good feeling as well. And it was a long delay, but I knew it would be worth waiting to run, hustle, and quickly get that other CD out, and then be saying, "Oh, should have done it on this guitar," would have been, a terrible feeling. So I waited and waited, and I apologize to people who've been waiting long for that fifth album, but it was necessary, and that's the reason. But again, see, in our world today, where everything is globalized, packaged, shrink wrapped, and flattened, all the more reason to counter it by going back to non-digitized music in that sense, And even when I'm playing a lot, I still use pedals instead of a digital interface. I use that too, but I try to not use it all the time. And I'll actually get it, like I've got a fretless bass, or I'll get another, just to have the instrument in the hand, the analog thing, and then analog pedals or whatever, just to keep the eyes off the screen, because we spend so much time on the screen. And that's really good as well to bring into people's lives, is musical instruments, and then everybody's digitizing it now. And that's good when you come to the recording aspect or whatever, but just to, play it in the room or the studio as itself, with a bunch of analog pedals, or the instrument itself plugged in, because everybody can get the bass sound now from digital software, right? Everybody can get a fretless bass sound from a digital software, and lots of other instruments, like a baritone guitar or detuned guitar, right? But then you're 24/7 on the screen, and I think that's bad for musicians. Musicians need to play with the mandolin in their hands, the harmonica, the flute, the harp, the guitar, the drum, whatever. They need to have it, even the keyboard. They need to have it in front of them, without always that digital screen in front of them. Because what's happening, the danger is that now most of the music is in some sense synthesized in the negative sense. This doesn't hold for those who are strictly making synthesized music. That's a whole different story. But for goodness sake, try to make a differentiation between, an amp on a guitar, electric or other, and then the digital interfaces, which help you bring it to the world or perfect it. If you want creativity to continue flowing, the juices of it, you must play with the actual instrument. So to me, this is a meditation as well. Don't you see? It's not just limited to creating music. This is a whole way of life now. That's like something of the past, to bring you and to ground you and to take you away from the digital interfaces, if people understand what I mean by that.
Yeah, and that's probably why well, it's not why, but when I started doing that whole audio engineering stuff, and that was after I already started to play an instrument. So, but just because of the lack of financial means or the space, I found digital ways of recording. I've got, like I showed you before, the thing that the studio is like a one little thing, but it allows me digitally though to kind of replace the whole mixing board that you see in these studios, which is, for some people it looks and sounds like it's a step back, but for me I've been teaching myself how to work that, just from scratch. It is digital, but at least I play instruments as well. But it's just uh, because of the lack of space and financial means that I don't have the actual physical mixers
Yeah,
and buttons and stuff. But there's pros and cons to it as well, of course.
completely. It's like not having book library shelves to put all your books on. If you don't have the space to have a proper studio, then why bother? Doing it from a laptop or a computer makes so easy, and it's a shortcut, and it's absolutely essential. I couldn't do what I'm doing without it. But at the same time, I'm very conscious of not letting go of the other original style of just playing the guitar through an amp and still remaining true to that as well. Because that's where the creativity really is. But yeah, I could have gone on after open mic. I could have gone on to join up with some of those guys or form a band by calling other people, but it just didn't seem right. It just didn't seem right because it was still in the middle of perfecting the art, so to speak. And as I said, until '98, I didn't really have good guitars to play on. So when I got those new Taylors, it was a matter like starting from scratch again. I had a lot of tracks to finish and polish and new ones to write, but it also seemed like, whoa, I'm really hearing the guitar for the first time. That guitar that was given to me was a cedar, guitar. And the guy who gave it to me believed in my music, and he saw the hassle I was going through, and he knew that you can't play that beautiful music on that piece of crap. So that was a big step forward, and then the next and the next and the next. And then I started noticing that those guitars also were a little bit limited for what I wanted to do as I became more of an ear of a producer, right? Then I started to realize, the limitations of those guitars, brilliant as they were for anybody else. So then I had to go through another transition of getting rid of those, swapping them for something that I felt, had a brighter tone or whatever. And then that went through another 5 years experience of trying to, and then I didn't realize that it was that the maple wood is probably the one you want. But then no sooner do I get a maple guitar than I find out the downside, which is that maple is a very unforgiving wood. It demands that you play with unbelievable precision, whereas mahogany and rosewood sort of they're the good teacher that turns the blind eye, and that your imperfections actually sound good. They sound part of the music. Maple, no chance. It's the strict music teacher from hell. You've got to fret properly. So what did that do? That's another 5 years of of becoming a better player, because now it's demanding that the wood is teaching you.
Yeah,
And
it's
you're
the
going,
same thing
oh,
with it's the same thing with drums actually, because I started out with drums, and you've got single ply, 3 ply, and even 7 ply
that's
now,
right.
and you've got different skins and different, even your sticks, which are made from wood, have an effect on it, and then the hardware. Don't even forget the hardware, because the drums it's all wood, and you're was gonna say banging your wood, but it's kind of but it's and the cymbals, they're made of different, like bronze. You have the cheaper ones, and you've got different different uh, you know things that make up the sound, and a lot of people who are not um, uh, you know into what we're into, they just, every drum kit is the same thing, every flute even is the same thing, but it's there's actually some people have made the instrument with their own hands, so there's a whole history behind every instrument then.
Oh yeah, and when it comes to guitars, there's also that issue. I have a link on the website links page between what's called a solid body guitar and a laminated. This is the first non-laminated guitar that I've played. It's called solid body, uh, and people say that makes a big difference. I don't think it makes a big difference as they say, or at least let's put it this way: the laminated guitars work for me sound wise. I got rid of two, high class solid body guitars for a laminated guitar, because again it had the sound. So all the rules are there to be broken. Really, I especially in my work, Any rule that ever existed, it's been broken. So a laminated guitar, why would a person who plays very well, high level, got all these original tracks, want what would be considered a kind of an entry level guitar that's laminated? Yeah, me, because all the other ones didn't sound good. Mostly it was a bass issue. It was back to that thing I said about the Celtic style of music that is very lacrimosa, is the Latin term, right? Of tears, right? But it's played on the sweetest instruments. Now that creates drama, that creates conflict, that's pathos, and all the rest of it. And so in my own way, I realized I didn't want to get a guitar that was too muddy, where the bass, right? The bass strings are the first three. And especially the heavier bass might have been too muddy. Great for a singer or whatever, but for me, it didn't. It was the opposite effect of what I wanted. So the maple guitars, they knock that bass out, and the bass string is so much less resonant, and it's a little brighter, and just a hair, and that's what I wanted. And so again, that was a saving grace. That was a really good ritual. It was a marker, along the way, which without that, I think I would have been very, very frustrated. There was one time actually that I got a guy to take off the low string and move all the strings up so that the second string was the low string. Wow. And then the gap that was at the bottom, he put another one of these. He just put another one, and we tightened them up, and it worked for a while, right? Because I just couldn't stand that heavy bass, right? So I've tried everything. And in the end, that didn't work because it lowers the tension of the neck, and then the guitar doesn't stay in tune a lot. And then you have to have a guitar that has more wood, and it just gets into a big problem. So I dropped that system, but for a while it worked for me because I got rid of that muddy tone. But then when I found the maple guitar, then that took care of it. At least, it took care of it through the latter years of experience. And I had a dream. I wouldn't have even got that guitar except the previous night I had a dream about a black guitar. And I went down to the shop and I start, looking for something, and there was nothing on the shelves that I saw. And then this mate of mine who worked in the shop said, "Oh, have you ever heard of Doyle Dykes? The famous American guitarist?" And I said, "No." And he whipped out from the window this black guitar that's a Doyle Dykes, signature guitar, which I bought, right? And it was black. And it was like, ding, something's just happened, like a deja vu. And then when I played the guitar, it had the tone I wanted. And they go, "Sure, that's maple," because they know everything I don't know, right? They go, I said, "Hey, that's really bright, kind of raspy or brittle." He goes, "Yeah, it's made out of maple." And this Doyle Dykes guy plays with steel fingertips, really brash and loud. And it had the sound I wanted. Not totally pleasant, because it was a very different learning curve from what I've been used to for years and years and years. So I didn't particularly personally like it, but it did the job I wanted it to do. And it was only after maybe a year that I started to actually like the tone and prefer it. You see, so it was a big breakthrough, and that's how I was able to then start. I didn't start recording the albums until I had that Doyle Dykes guitar, and I still have that. And then I got two others like it, because when you're playing 10 kinds of open tuning, another problem arises, which is that if you keep detuning the guitar, even a really good handmade guitar, it's not good. You want to keep it in the same tuning, for the purposes of the neck and other things. And if you're going to change it, then change it to tunings that are very similar to the one you're using, and keep that routine. Don't be wildly, changing every time you do into these wildly different tunings. It's not going to be good for the neck. Well, what does that mean? More bloody expense, of course, what it means, because now you have to buy more instruments and keep them, and this one's in 3 tunings, that one's in 3 tunings, this one's in 4 or 2. Or you're honored to do that, because you will ruin a guitar by constantly going from the C's to the D's and back repeatedly. The guitar will stop staying in tune. A neck looks like a very solid thing. It is absolutely not. And they've done, spectrographic stuff where under a microscope you can see that the string doesn't bounce up and down. It moves like a serpent.
It's a wave.
Right?
It's really
a wave. It's an amazing thing when I saw that. And also the neck, of course, less exaggerated, but it's also a wave. And so open tuning, you run into a lot of issues with tunings, with tuning. It won't stay in the right tunings unless you've got already a custom made thing that builds. And then I tried that, but then they were charging me an astronomical amount of money. And that was no way I was going to do that. So the next best thing is to buy cheaper guitars, and then keep them in those open tunings and grab them, when you need to. And that they ended up having that, which was not expected and which wasn't planned, and which I don't really like to have done. But this is all the different kind of things. A person who's good at souping up cars, dragsters and all. Anybody's into upgrading anything and doing it with a real love realizes that in the end you have to make the very tools that you're using. You have to make the tools. That's why I have so much respect for Bob Taylor in California. Bob Taylor is not only a guitar manufacturer, he makes the tools that other guitar manufacturers, Larrivee, Martin, they've all borrowed his tools. They've all taken his patented tools for making guitars. The man is a genius, right? And in a way, he's the fulfillment of this rule, which means that you almost have to break a thing down to its component parts. All I wanted to do was play music. I had no idea, the road that was lying ahead. Because I don't have the hands to just pick up like everybody else. Any instrument that'll do, pretty much, by and large. I'm so finicky. There was so many issues. Oh, the neck's not thick and thin enough. The gauge isn't, the strings aren't right. The tone isn't good. The bass is crap. I don't like the color of the tuners, and stupid shit, right? But I'm that kind of musician. I have so much admiration for those just, and they're at it. And they don't have any problems. I've seen people at the open mic. I used to marvel. And then hey, can I play your guitar for a minute? And I play 13 gauge strings on it, and like sounded like plywood. But on their hands, it sounds great. So it was like a learning curve for me, realizing that, look, if you want to get to where your sound, this is going to be a mighty artisan. This is the scenic route to hell. But
that's a good one.
But the end result is, forged in steel, getting your sound. And it's not, if it pleases others, that's good too. But it's a sound that I'm the one playing it morning, noon, and night. So it has to sound good to me. You know what I mean? And first it was silken steel strings. You couldn't play those live to people. They're so slight and faint. People go, can you turn it up? We can't hear anything at the back here. So then you go, oh, that's not going to work. And every aspect of it. I'm not the guy who just gets wheels in the instrument, sits down, and you're good to go. It has to be brought down to the like a Lego set. You have to pull it apart and put it back together again with you knowing each and everything about it. And I tell you, not a lot of people have to do that. This is something that takes you on a journey. I have such admiration when I look up some of my favorite guitarists, and they're playing guitars that are totally generic, just off the shelf stuff. No frills, no beating around the bush. No, none of this. It's just a generic guitar that does the trick. It's just a regular Gibson or whatever, and they're getting beautiful tones out of it and stuff like that without any messing about. I really admire that. I wish that had been the case for me, but it's just not. These Neil Young guys with their big thick hands and their technique, and it's just easy because their musculature is very different. Their attack is naturally brighter and louder, and they don't have that iffy relationship, problematic relationship with the instrument like I've had, But again, because of it, it's quite an inventive process, actually, in the end. But the main thing for the person listening, they don't give a shit about this and don't need to. It's the final result. Did it work? Is the music getting across to people? And then also, is it getting across to them in this emotional way where they understand that it's mood based? I already know everyone won't like it. It's got to do with certain people, where it takes them on a journey. They're not so concerned about the name of the track even, or, the artwork or whatever. They're understanding that this is a very personalistic thing, and that if you listen to it, then it will open up your own imagination and you'll have your own visual, and sonic experience with it all. That was the ultimate goal.
Yeah, it's the content that really what it's about exactly. And I'm kind of like what you said about really knowing every it has to be your instrument. I've never been, to be honest, I've never been interested in brands or manufacturers or something, and I don't even know much about them still. It's not to sound like I'm beyond that, like oh, I don't care, but I have no idea. I just happen to have an LTD and Pearl drums, but it could have been Tama drums or Gibson. I don't know, but And you have some people who swear by, they wanna, they're like a Gibson guy or Ibanez guy or Pearl guy, but I guess I haven't really. It's like it made me feel sometimes like I'm kind of, am I even really into it? Am I really authentic? Because I don't even know this model and this brand, and some people ask me, so what do you play? What kind of brand? And I really have to think. Oh yeah, I've got two LTDs, and oh well, what's the hardware on those? And I don't know. So, I mean, it's not that I don't care. I guess I'm not like you, for example. Like you have to really pick apart the thing to make it yours. So.
But I've had to. I wasn't like that either. I'm the least nerdy person. In fact, I despise most people like that in a way because I don't see enough creativity out of them. I'm very right-brained and very creative. That's been my focus. It's been my vocation. And it's only been as a derivative, secondary, necessity. And I had this problem from way back. Going to those music shops where nobody helps you and they just want you out of there. It started there. It started where you have all the curiosity and nothing ever happens. And we had this even with other people. I'm also the kind of person who, with a modicum, tiniest hair of encouragement, I really believe in encouraging children, because I went through this myself. I believe that the slightest bit of encouragement does all the world for you. And so the few people that did encourage, that music is, a lot of it is because of that. Because I'm a very sensitive person in that sense that if it didn't get that encouragement, it might not have continued, or at least not continued in the same way. And so all the stuff that I've learned has been vocational. But then a weird thing happens is that even in your vocation, you think you're setting off to do something in a creative way, but in the end, you're going to have to know about how to mix colors. You're going to have to know about brushes. You're going to have to know about how to clean those fucking brushes. You're going to have to know about light, and that window is not cutting it. You might have to change your whole studio. Oh, thanks a lot, right? You're going to have to know about all sorts of other things that you never guessed were part of the process. The canvas needs to be covered, with the white first. The white might need to be wetted, and all sorts of other crazy ass shit in order to get to the goal. So it's very Hegelian. It's a very unfolding process in which the thing that you're doing throws up an imperfection in your face, like it did for me. I can list them. It's like I can make a chart of it. And these are searing problems that stop you. When I was up open mic, what are you actually doing when you're sitting there? You're sitting there tied up in knots. Well, every Joe Schmo's getting up there and thrashing out those Joni, armor trading tracks or whatever, and beaming from ear to ear. Everything's a breeze. It's just fun. And you wish you were like them, that they could get away with that, but you're not. There's always something in my life that was always to negotiate, to change, to fix, and to micromanage. And it's not the way I ever wanted things to be, you see, but that's the way it's come out. So in many ways, what I did also then was I said, right, the tracks that I play, some of them, the shorter pieces, for instance, are very simple. But it's like complex simplicity, if you get the meaning, right? There's a lot in it. It's like minimalism, right? It's very much minimalistic art in just a very small phrase, very very quiet piece or short piece. There's an eternity in it, so it hones your task to learn how less is more, and that's I talked about the ascending descending scales as one feature. Simplicity would be another in a way. There are some tracks that seem much more complex, but again, underlying theme is simplicity. Try to communicate what you're trying to communicate in the simplest possible way, and only get complicated or get more intricate if it's necessary. Never for show, never for, look what I can do technique wise, only because it expresses, a particular thing. And that's why in that track, and Shadow, I think it's Shadow on the opening track. It starts very simple and then goes in the latter part becomes all flamenco-like and complex, right? But it starts very slow, right? Sort of classical like. There's that dissonant chord. So it goes on like that for a while, repeats, and then blasts into this fucking faster piece, right? So again, even in the faster piece, this is a perfect example of how something else is going on, something else, it's a very right brain, left brain experience, and it's not for show, it's saying something in there. There's volumes and volumes of life experience and thought and mood goes into all of that.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of bands are you into at the moment, or what is on your mind when it comes to that?
Been listening to a lot of the Church, their latest album's a masterpiece. I listen to a lot of Echo and the Bunnymen, from the rock pop, but I listen to a lot of the Moody Blues. And as I say now, because I'm listening more with a creative ear, oh my God, the whole experience of even bands I've listened to before, Typo Negative, what they're
Typo
doing.
Negative, very good.
Yeah, phenomenal bands, and Paradise Lost and Candlemass and King Diamond, and so I listen to a lot of the music I still always have listened to, and Creator and Accept, bands like that. Saxon just blow me away. I mean, consistently one great album after another. But now I'm listening to, why did they do it that way, or why that intro, or what the hell was that, thinking more in terms of, see, why I like Echo and the Bunnymen is because the guitarist in that band has a style in which it's just lingering on the one note. It's a technique that, like, like that kind of thing, right? Where there's a lot of lingering. Instead of doing chords, of course he does that, right? But there's a lot of this weird hanging on just the one string to make music. And I picked up on that technique, just like I did with Tony Iommi and these endless tempo changes, right? I find that really interesting, right? So there's all sorts of things to listen to, not just recreationally. So, and I do listen to that, all sorts of different kinds of music that way, but also listen to it now. It would be also in a very sort of instructive way, and that's been a big help, through the years to do that. It's when the learning curve really comes in, and the people have a signature type of sound. Some of my favorite guitarists. And I, again, always, focus on the simplicity aspect, not so much the complexity. So when through the 80s and 90s, when all that shredding and, all these different stupid techniques were popular, right now there's all this slapping stuff on the guitar, that's the in technique. I don't hear much music. I don't hear much music in that. It's just a technique. It's like a flamenco technique, or
it's a trick. It's
a trick.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And it's good. And I can do it, right? And I did it in the past and I got sick of it right away, so, and it's cool, for what it is. But again, techniques come and go. And then people are left with wanting music again. So I try not to follow any technique. I can appreciate it for what it is. And I do listen to some of that kind of music, in today. But the bands that are the highest in mixing, the bands who've got it nailed, right? When it comes to the ensemble idea or the production aspect, which is the church, what they're doing in the background, you have to put the headphones on even to hear it, or what Echo and the Bunnymen are doing, or with their lyrics, right? To me, that's endlessly fascinating. And then it means that you can listen to the same tracks over and over again because there's so much happening. And here's the beauty. It sounds like nothing's happening. It's minimalistic. That to me is the essence of everything. Less is more. How do you do that? And some people have done it. So I try to learn as much as I can from them.
Yeah, it's the details that really. I mean, back in the I believe 70s or something, if they wanted to make something sound as if it's going around, they would actually, toss the microphone, in the air, just making it swing so that everything it picks up goes around. So that's the, and now it's. I mean, you can do it now still, but those things it just tells you that a lot of thought has gone into it, which is good to hear that it's still here in some bands, of course.
Oh yeah, and it is. The band the Delays are good, and Kasabian. There are more recent bands that are also top notch. I listen to a lot of bands like that. Sinner God, the metal band. There's Absolva. There's a lot of new bands coming out. Some of them are mostly junk. Very derivative, and there's also good stuff out there with good lyrics, meaningful lyrics. So I always stay open to what's happening and fresh influences. And then if it's largely some of the best stuff that's ever been done, right, in music has already been done in the past on all levels. So a lot of what you're going to hear as you moved on, through the 90s and 2000s is derivative. But the thing is, that doesn't stop it being bad, right? Like say some director, right, like Woody Allen makes a black and white film, right? Francis Ford Coppola did it partly as an homage, but he also did it in many ways better than they did. So just because it's derivative doesn't mean it's bad. So everything's a very, very fine line, But when you're turning the great classics of Shakespeare and you're just utterly multiculturalizing it and making it a mockery, and that's not good. And that's what our world is filled with now, is just how do you tear down the morale of Western culture? How do you throw mud and sludge on everything that was established, and do it to a millennial generation who's as thick, as you can imagine, totally and utterly devoid of any cultural elements at all. They're not even in a culture. There is no Mitwelt for these people. They're just totally vagrant, and that's the culture we're living in. And therefore, what now your job is to go out and seek that great music, classical, whatever, Django Reinhardt. How many people have ever heard that name? They haven't even heard about people much later than that who are actually contemporary and popular, And so I say there's a lot of bands out there to rediscover. For Americans, it could be, John Fogerty, for instance, just throwing out a name there. For a Brit, it could be, Tears for Fears, or, a band like that. Go revisit them. You thought of them in one way, one time, and maybe now if you listen to them, it would be totally different. Or go and rediscover The Who, John Entwistle's bass playing. Wow, right? Or something. So the past is already a great repository, which you can dip into endlessly. There's so many bands, Jethro Tull, Wishbone Ash. I mean, how many people listen to that band and they blow everybody else off the stage? They practically invented the twin guitar harmony that bands like Thin Lizzy, Iron Maiden, and other bands picked up on later. Yeah, how many people have ever heard of Wishbone Ash?
Mm-hmm.
Their albums are monstrously brilliant.
And I'm actually in a like a small band with my father and a friend of his, and we play songs from before the time that I was even born. Like the '60s, and I used to be like, oh, that's such a just lame. It's all lame, and then all these chords, But then I was and in that band I do drums. I play drums, and there's a song "Substitute" by The Who.
That's right. It's a classic.
So yeah, but as I'm doing it on drums, like this is actually pretty, it's actually it's a good song. It's not as it's not it's intricate, and it's especially for that time. And I think I've been going back to the past with certain bands and just and letting go of all my thoughts about it. My ideas that it's lame or it's old fashioned or simple. a lot of those bands are not simple at all. They're very, very intricate.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, that's really true. And that's why you can dip back into it time and time again. Some bands are more expressive of that. They really are complex, and others are simpler, but yet you learn a great deal about the dynamics, say, between the bass and the drums, for instance, which is a key aspect, And so one has to sort of listen to that in a way that was never heard before. So yeah, it's a mix. I listen to a lot of contemporary music, and then there's also the older stuff, And to me, I don't even think of it as old or young. It's completely. I mean, there are some bands that have such a sound for me that it speaks of a specific place, and there's no getting away from that. Maybe the Moody Blues would be like that for me. The Chameleons would be like that for me, where I'm thinking in terms of streets, and a kind of light and a kind of feel of London at a particular era, which can never be captured again. There's certain bands that really do that for you. And so they're a bit different. They're a bit different. They may not even be doing that consciously, but they really sound of a particular time and space that can never be taken away. And those are the songs I think that people prefer when they hear them again. They go, oh, that's one of my favorites, because it takes me back to this time, which is so meaningful to you. That's key as well. And I've always then thought that the tracks I will compose, will have that aspect as well. Nature is always on my mind, of course, when I'm doing it. But there's also, I'm aware that when people listen to it, and I've got feedback from people who say that, wow, that reminds me of my childhood, and it was a very stunning experience to hear that track or whatever, and so this is the power of music, because it speaks to you without words. It gives and gives and gives. And it's something that even if you're just on the receiving end, you may never create music yourself, but that's the whole crazy thing about it. You can just be on the receiving end and be satisfied with that. But we've got to have a culture that gives more time to good music. Right now it's been, strong-armed into listening to absolute crap. And
Yeah.
it is really frightful crap. I'm in some places, one time, I think even recently, and I was almost like, unbelievable, the shit that they were playing. I almost looked at the people and said, is this a fucking joke, what I'm hearing here over the speakers? But they're so brain dead,
I know. Yeah, I know.
and they love it.
And especially when I was in the U.S., I mean, this whole pop culture is everywhere now. It's even here in Holland, of course. Um, but but like you said, art itself, art is so forceful that it can be used against you. So it's really that it's art against the world, and the world is also against the art, because look at what's happening, and you've got all this architecture stuff that's going on, and that's being rebuilt and to modern times to meet the standards, and now you've got it in different aspects of arts as well. So we have to really get back into the roots of it all, and I've been going back to even Rachmaninoff. I really like his style. I think that's he's the one who I like the most of all of the greats, Rachmaninoff. And then you can really understand, oh wow, this is some guy who just made it up. He just it came out of his mind. It's intellectual property. It's like it came from his mind, and now it's timeless. So potent.
Yeah, like even 13th century music from Spain. Yeah, I like Jordi Savall, who plays this old ancient instrument, the viol. That all sounds real simple until you see these 7-string instruments that they're playing it on with a bow. And then you go, oh my God, what the hell is this, right? But again, as I was saying with the guitar, right? When I get into all of those technical aspects, they weren't technical to me. They were artistic. I should mention that. See, this binding, right? It's from Africa. It's an African wood, right? It's different than the top. The top is different from the, rosewood that's inside. The top is probably spruce, but it's painted black, right? This bridge is ebony, right? The fingerboard is ebony, but the neck is mahogany, right? With a ebony overlay. Then these mother of pearl, they're not regular mother of pearl. This is a specific darker type, to make it look a bit subdued. Right? The headstock, it's got a tuner on it, but there's the logo. See, and I didn't have that. It's a Celtic See that Celtic braid? Avalon, right? And I didn't get that done in their normal traditional size or coloring. It was another kind of mother of pearl, right? So every aspect, it's an artistic thing, right? The tuners or whatever, this inlay, mother of pearl inlay, that was hand. We had to discuss that as well. So even when I said that it becomes a technical thing, as a matter of fact, it's more art. That's probably one of the reasons I was able to get into it, because not being a very technical person, it didn't matter, because you're dealing with an artistic aspect, as well. Like, think about even the strings, right? 3, those strings there, the thinner ones, they're like the feminine, and then you get 3 masculine. So there's 2 voices, even when you're not fretting the damn thing. And so what actually turns out then is that a chord is actually the marriage of the masculine and the feminine. So it's androgyny. So what we know as a chord is like a hexagram, right? Like the 2 intertwining triangles, but a million different versions of it. But it's the voice or the conversation between the masculine hemisphere and the feminine hemisphere, and it's all language. So what the listener, the player, is involved in a discussion, right? It's a incredible language of which we're all participating, and when you're listening to it, you're listening to the conversation, and it's the highest. It's androgyny. It's the hemispheres, in a kind of a commune, and we know it. See, at the very back of our being is the memory of being able to decode it. What we've been saying in this discussion is that the modern music is the furthest, grossest, orc level grunt, right? It's the most inarticulate grunting that everybody thinks, yeah, this really cool, man. See, so it's like a cry, right? And how can it be without human voice? A cry should be something that the human voice does. A steel string, who would ever imagine? So it's what you're bringing out of your imagination, right? And this facilitates it. But it has the music of the spheres in it. The 5th, 7th, and 12th is where the harmonics are, right?
Yep.
You see, as I say, the masculine and the feminine. It's a hexagram in sound. It's a sonically, mystical experience, and therefore the debauchers of it, they know exactly what they're doing in many ways, because they have that high insight, but they've chosen to invert it. I've always said in my other work, that anything that can take the soul up can also bring it down, and people don't understand that. What I meant by that is that the techniques by which one raises their consciousness or purifies themselves, the same tool can be used to do the opposite. You still think you may be getting something out of it. People listening to disco in the 70s were having a good time. People listening to the shash that you have today are believing that they're getting their frustrations out or whatever. There's always going to be a rationale for it. It makes me feel good, right? So there you are, right? They're not taking out, a barometer or a measuring device to wonder whether it's good for them or not in that sense, or whether it has these other qualities. Only very few people in the world have. And even less people have the realization that music or something magical affects you on all levels: physical, spiritual, emotional, and intuitive, and creatively, and all of that. And very few things other than music do that. They can affect you on all those levels. And so when you're trying to work with the instrument is far more the teacher than you are. But where that goes wrong is when you get some nerdy type of person or left brain type of person who this is just dead. This is just a dead thing that their ego is now in charge of. And they're going to, become a shredder, or they're going to just try to impress everybody. And I find that so boring. I'm out of there already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that everybody who's got a superb technique is like that. Believe me, that's not true. Some of the greatest players are also very egoless people as well. But you know the type I'm talking about, right? Where everything around them is merely to vehicleize, their own sort of ego in a very mundane and idiotic way. We all know people like that. For me, this has been to ground the ego, to put the ego in its right place hierarchically, so that then other things can fly, other areas of your being can be explored. But yeah, again, it's not just technical. There's a lot of weird symbolism and meaning. 22 frets, 6 strings in one neck. That's 722. That's pi, right? 6 actual strings, but the neck can be considered a sort of a hard string. That's 7 horizontal, and then 22 frets. Don't need to go for any further, right? That's pi, for goodness sake. So again, you're up to something, whether you know it. And here's the beauty of the most spiritual things there are. They don't advertise themselves. People could play a guitar all their lives and never know what we just talked about. And you're not meant to know. It doesn't matter that you know. The greatest things in your life are right in front of your eyes, the great miracles, but you have to create the eyes to see it. What are the four vowels? Does anybody realize what that's all about? Why they're there and what they mean? Nope. But they've used them a million times. That's the difference between seeing and observing. You run up the stairs of your house. How many stairs are there? Well, I don't know. So there's a difference between just seeing and observing. There's a difference between being and just human, or living and existing and being. There's a difference between awareness and consciousness. So yeah, I mean, there's no question that an instrument will help you explore not only your physicality, but your emotionality. And for me, part of that whole learning curve has been very physical. I've said that sort of obliquely in other programs about, shadow work and the nature of the body, right? How that's involved in it. But see, for me, the guitar playing was always demanding far more awareness of body than just fingers moving on the fretboard. For instance, to give you an example, this thumb is so central to guitar playing. For me anyway. For other people who've got much better skill, it might not be the big thing. But see, this was like the sergeant major, that when you're sloppy here, this thumb then becomes the fixed point. And so you have to be conscious of it, right? So not conscious in an exaggerated way, but you have to be sort of feeling that thumb. You've got to be with it. It's not just a dead thing, at the back of the fretboard. It's actually something like a magnet on two sides of the table. And you have to be kind of, when you lock into having the thumb, it helps you then. And it helps you fret better. And, like I said, the wood maple became a teacher. And then the thumb became the sergeant major that said, what's all fucking this shit? So it anchored you, Then where's my feet? Where's my spine? What is this? And I'm just looking, oh, for fuck's sake. So you correct yourself, right? You correct your position. Then I went to the eyes. Suddenly the eyes later became a thing about, am I even looking at what I'm doing? No, I'm not. Why am I not? Start fucking being here now, start being here. And are your feet on the ground? Time and time again, they're not. For 30 seconds they are, and then it's back to some, wrong positioning. And so what you do is you start to correct not in a draconian way, by this classic Western approach of just rote. But you do it because now something else is teaching you, something much higher than your average class teacher at the front, bashing his cane, is teaching. This is the way to do it. You're learning, but you're learning from the right teacher, and you're seeing immediate results, right? So it becomes a discipline thing. Then now you're into a whole discipline, but it's like martial arts discipline. It's the discipline of you being the teacher and the master at the same time, the teacher and the pupil at the same time. How many people know that? How many people know that? So there's certain practices on this planet, and music is one of them, that really is the true disciplining. And so children need to be taught that. Every children should have an instrument. They should obviously have the one they like to play. They should never be forced to play something, they absolutely hate. But they should have some sort of musical instrument or musical interest, because it will teach a lot of other things. It's a whole gymnastics, that one would never ever, and again, I only speak for myself. I was in such a mess, you see, so I had to really correct step by step, every muscle, every, it was really an interesting process.
And for me, the same effect that you just explained is when I play drums, because your whole body, first of all, your spine, be aware of your spine, because you don't want to be slouched over like this. And so you've got all of your limbs, all at once. They have to play, you have to use your right hand as the backbone, for a hi-hat, for example. And then you've got the snare drum with your left hand, and you have to time it. But it's not like some people that I've been teaching drums to, they think very just like it's just maths, just so it's 1, 2, 3. Oh, I forgot the 3. Oh my god! And then they make this whole formula in their head. Which, I mean, there's also that. So there's also, it is a mathematical thing as well. But some people just only think about the drums and they memorize where to play which hand or which foot. And so when I play drums, especially live, actually, I was so aware of my body and of my spirit, really, because I'm on this stool with drums in front of me. I'm the backbone of the whole band. If I make if I fuck up, then the whole band will just be, come on, dude, everyone's just thrown off. And it made me feel really in charge in a way, and also very this is basically what life is. You have to be captain of your own ship, and then sometimes I can feel where my doubts are when I'm suddenly afraid of hitting a certain cymbal too loudly. I'm like, what is this shit? You're a drummer. Just hit that thing, So it is a kind of a reflection of how I'm feeling mentally when I'm on the drums. It's like, okay, I'm not really into it, and then I can feel that I actually want to go home, and then all that stuff comes, and then maybe it's not really my instrument, and then I automatically think, no, you just came here to play drums. Now you're gonna fucking play the drums, and just all this mental and psychological stuff. Also, it's making me aware of myself when I play, because you're hitting things with your arms and with your with your feet, and it's a very intense experience. And I'm sure you have that with your instrument as well. But yeah,
that's right, I do. All sorts of things can throw you off. It's very good to have humbling experiences, where you listen to people who are way better or whatever, and then deal with that self-esteem issue. When at open mic, we'd have some guys floating through. They weren't part of the Seattle group, but they know where all the open mics are, and they travel and they play. And by God, we had some people coming in there that was just dropping good, And then you want to throw the thing through the window and go, I'm done. So what that does is it helps you fortify yourself. It helps you know where your limitations are. Yes, there are people that are better than me, right? That's a good feeling. You've got to turn it into a good feeling. You've got to, grow up and say, right, I'm not as good as that guy. But that doesn't mean I then capitulate and stop playing. Whoever told me that?
Good point.
Even if you'll never be like it. Hey, all my mentors, I'll never be like them, and never could. Even if I lived for 200 years, I couldn't play as good as the heroes I have. That's a fact. It's just not possible for a multiplicity of reasons. And that's not a statement of, oh, well, I'm not very good. I know. I'm telling you from a fact. But that doesn't stop me going on. So the psychological thing is, are you doing this to compete with others? Or are you doing it because it's an absolute necessity? Like I said, it's an extension of your psyche. You have to do it for all the health and hygiene reasons, And so that's why I've always carried on. Also, I think it's a very important challenge to be humbled at given points, and to be, set a boundary where, this and no further, or this, I'm here. But then where you set that boundary, be the best you can be within that. You can still strive for excellence, right? So I don't take it bad that somebody else is a better guitar. My God, the world is filled with better guitars. That never crossed my mind. And even when it did, it was a pleasantry. It was something that said, fantastic, look what I've got to look up to now. I can always enjoy such and such a person, always knowing that you can learn from them. But on a psychological level, instead of throwing it down and saying, I'm done with that, that comes from the ego, right? When you realize how beneficial this learning curve is, and that you're learning from this instrument more than you could ever learn from anybody, and that it's always there for you, right? And it's there also in the darkest times. It's better than the Salvation Army hotline, right? Then that you owe it a debt of gratitude, you see, and then you move from that point and you try to express yourself through it. But it's a really personalistic thing. For me, it's not really something that can be done or necessarily should be done in front of others. Being naturally introverted, I went and played outside as a compensation to balance the fact out that I am too introverted, right? So I set myself a challenge then. As I said, it happened accidentally. I had no idea that back in 2000, it was when I started, that I'd walk into this place just to get a cup of coffee, and there's 50 guys, 50 people sitting there practicing. None of them were that great. It was just to get together and have fun. And for the first time in my life, I was in a mood where I could do that. Never would have happened before. But I was at a particular year where, that opportunity came and I was ready to move forward. And then a learning curve took place that might never have happened. And then you see people who are way worse than you. And then you see people who are, much, much better. And so finding this place it's really healthy. It's a really, really good thing. Because in a creative, heroic kind of person, it's going to want you to, it will mean that now you have to strive to be better. And that will mean opening your senses, opening your ears. What are they doing better? Go up and question it. Go up and find out, right? Go up and spend the money, to get a better instrument, to get some more CDs, to change the strings, to improve upon something. Like I said, there's so much work goes into an instrument. And although I was first resistant to knowing anything about that, in the end, you kick yourself. You go, what? Why have you got this resistance? This is interesting. I'm not into the big math of it. I don't even know half the tunings, what they are technically, that I play. So I'm never going to be on a nerd level, right? But at the same time, it was okay to learn quite a lot of it because the woods are a living thing, and they all have their different voices and expressions and all of the rest of it. And each maker has their own particular history and skill. And so none of that's bad to learn. People waste their time learning a lot of rubbish that has no validity, at all. So you're never going to waste the time that you spend working with a musical instrument. And just because you happen to find out something's better, what does that word better even mean? Something that's on the American Icon, American Idol, that's better? That's what the world thinks is better?
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if Green Day can do it, you can definitely do
it.
Right?
Don't even start about Green Day.
You talk about these other morons who are making millions. Well, look, isn't it a very clear message that if they can do it, if fucking Suzanne Vega can whine and whine on, oh, fuck, right? You can as well.
Yep.
Right? The ceiling is not that high. And if, my God, if they can do it, get up and do it yourself. It's so pathetic. So there may be people better than you, but it's a fucking lot worse. So get on with it, And as I said, I've just been that person who, for vengeance reasons and shock reasons and just something to do reasons. And again, I would say, like I said on my website, I've been led. It's not been something that I've ever done through a will. I don't think anyone would will to do the journey I was on. Really, I don't. but it was being led, and then being a good student and fascinating and not wanting to drop the ball, and then realizing what's reciprocated, what I'm getting from that experience, you see. And then don't forget either, this other work that people know me more for, that can become very fucking depressing.
I can imagine.
Right? Actually, it really doesn't become to me, but I'm speaking sort of a little bit hypothetically, but at the same time, there's a lot of truth to it. It can become a bore. It can become something like, holy shit, we're in the fucking Matrix, mate. So, all right, if you're in the prison, what do you do to alleviate, the tension, so to speak? And for me, I know others go to the piano or whatever. Others may go jogging, right? The guitar for me has been a way to, I hate to use the word escape, but I mean it in the more positive, creative sense. I don't mean it in the negative, evading who I am. I mean stepping aside and getting objectivity to say, hey, I'm a public face now. All my words go out to the public. Is there anything still private in my life? Is there anything where I can just retreat, so to speak, and just and be on my own and not so private, not so public, And so working with the guitar and music in general was that as well. Where it could have been very public if the band had succeeded, I don't think that would have been a good thing. I might have lost more than I gained. And so coming back to the instrument and learning from it is something very, very brilliant in that sense, to get back in touch with what sound is, what a tone is, what are your eyes and ears doing, what's your hand, like I said, the posture. I went through a lot of body work because I stupidly did things wrong on the first album and then came out with all these terrible, terrible tensions in the back. It was a learning curve, right? And then corrected that, you see, and then thought about, okay, what's the posture? Like you say, sitting on drums, there's a whole separate way. And then remember your wrists. Some drummers are really tight, and then they butt the wrists, they get carpal tunnel or whatever. There's this whole thing with the lightness of it. You're barely touching it. A very zen thing, The viewer doesn't see that. They just see you hammering away on the drums. They don't know that there's a whole art, going on there where there's a tremendous, you're using your wrists and your elbows and shoulder way different than they would possibly imagine. They think you're just thudding away on the drums, right?
Yeah.
No.
And actually, but there's always one smartass in the audience, because we had a gig when I was in my black metal band, really heavy, really heavy band, and there was a guy coming up to me after the gig, and he was like, "Oh, you're very good, but you should use your wrist like this." And I get out. Is that the only thing you're gonna say to me? You were, because I did see you headbang the whole time, So I must have done something good. But then he just took the time to, because people think it's just banging away at the drums. Anybody can do it, But there's a definite technique. You've got the French grip. You've got the jazz grip. You've got all different kind of grips, and you've even got feet techniques.
That's right.
Especially with double bass, and you've got the heel toe technique. You've got a swivel technique. You've got the stomping technique. So it's an art, and a lot of people don't even see it, and not just for drums, but just any instrument really.
Well, I wanted down the line after the project's over, I want to maybe do a few vlogs to get into some of the difficulter stuff, and also that kind of thing, and maybe help again people who are starting, not make some of the mistakes. Because remember, the one reason why I would really do vlogs is because there is a downside to all of this, and that is when you walk in to buy a friend an instrument or yourself, you will be ripped off.
Yes,
I've seen it time and time again, and I don't like it. And there's really not that many things you need to learn to stop that happening. So, I've had some friends wanted to buy a guitar, and immediately I said, "Let me see your hands." And then the next question I'd say, "All right, what kind of style of music do you like? Are you after classical? Are you after because you got to know that." And I said, "Look, just phone me up and take me down when you go to the shop, because they'll rip you off." So I'm very conscious of that. It can be an expensive thing, and you don't want to waste the money, and you don't want to be ripped off. So I always want to help people do that. I've done that in the past many times, and so I might do some vlogs. Remember, everything that's happened up to now, there's been no advertising. I wanted to wait on all of that. I've just been letting our friends hear it, and people that are on Facebook and everything. There's been no overt campaign of advertising yet. That's all to come. Moving forward on that, offering the WAV files for sale, maybe even CDs, you know, and moving through the whole marketing thing. Right now, I just wanted to enjoy the curve of finishing the projects, letting people have a very natural reaction to it, you know, and that's been really wonderful. And again, thanks to you for making this possible as well, to be the first time, we've ever really gone into it. So as of now, Shadow Wand, the 5th one is up. The 6th one will be up pretty shortly.
Yeah, awesome. I think we should kind of wrap it up by now because it's getting late here. Oh, so it's almost midnight here. So, where do people find your album for download or buying? Or
just type my name right into iTunes or whatever. But if you want to go to the site, well, there's some more facts and things. msarmusic.com. Just go to msar.com. There's the link on the first page. But msar music or Michael Tsarion music.com, and then that'll send you to all the links, because I'm presently on Amazon and on iTunes. Presently not on Google because I'm not happy with them. And again, anybody who wants the WAV file or the FLAC file, just contact me and I'll be happy to, you know, send them that as well, you know, if they want a little bit better quality. But I'm very happy with the way the quality is on those platforms.
it does sound very good.
Yeah, it just sounds good, you know. And as I say, I'm just, when all 6 are done, we'll probably move into much more forceful marketing of the whole, you know, set, the box set. But that'll be towards the, you know, latter part of the year. Right now, I'm just basking in the creative process and the feeling of release, you know, getting it out and hearing responses. So people should subscribe to my channel. If they go to Michael Tsarion Music YouTube channel, I'd be really happy to have your subscriptions and build that out so you can, you know, stay in tune with what we're doing. Really enthusiastic about that. Already got lots of subscribers and it's looking great. There's more every day. It's really, really fun to see that.
Very good. Yeah. Well, I think we should wrap it up then. I really enjoyed this, you know, talk. This different vibe of you know, of speaking. Because my podcast was mostly about philosophy and conspiracy and stuff, and I think people would like to see this side of you as well. So thank you very much for having done this.
No problem, mate. Oh, it's great to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. So thanks, John. Really appreciate it.
Okay, man. Well, have a good night, and everyone in the chat, thank you for you know, going through all this. Has been the longest podcast, I think, but I think we should do this again, definitely, and hope to speak to you soon.
Oh yeah. When the last one's done, I'd love to come back. Okay, John, take care, mate. Thanks again.